Are we up? Cool. There. Thank you. All right. Good evening. Welcome to the February 28th, 2018 ZBA meeting for the town of Merrimack. If you could all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rich, if you could read the preamble, please.
Absolutely. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We will proceed with the petitions in the order they are listed on the agenda, unless the board deems it appropriate to take a petition out of order. State law and local ordinances set out the criteria that must be met in order for this board to grant a request. The minimum requirements are outlined on the form provided by the Community Development Office, and the petitioner should proceed with this format to provide adequate justification for the board to grant the request. The chair will then open the meeting to hear testimony either for or against the request. All discussion will be between the speaker and the board. Please be respectful of all, and in the interest of time, refrain from repeating previous testimony. No new documentation will be accepted by the board for consideration this evening, but the board reserves the right to ask for additional testimony at any time. After hearing the facts from all parties regarding a petition, the chairman will close the public hearing, and the board will deliberate and vote on the request before moving on to the next petition. Please turn off all cell phones and pagers.
Thank you, Rich. The next ZBA meeting will be March 28th. And when you come in, when you come down, make sure that you sign in and make sure that the light on the microphone is bright green, so that obviously all your testimony has to be recorded. So, anybody planning on speaking this evening? You plan on testifying for or against a petition? You plan on speaking about a petition? I need you to stand and raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right. All right. Given tonight's agenda, we actually are going to be making a move in the items. The first item of the evening, Justin Sleeper, petition owner, has been withdrawn by petitioner. We are actually going to move up APMK Ventures to our first petition for the evening. So when I read out the petition, please come on down. APMK Ventures LLC, petitioner owner. I'll take on that. Special exception under section 2.02.2C of the zoning ordinance to permit a single-family dwelling in the C1 district. The parcel is located at 4 Harris Avenue in the C1 limited commercial and aquifer conservation districts and wellhead protection area. Tax map 6D-1, lot 030, case number 2018-3. Before we get started, Kathy and Lenny, you will be sitting in tonight for Tony and Lynn. Okay. Thank you. All right. If just you got the microphone, just state your name and.
My name is Peter McClintock. I'm the manager of APMK Ventures. What I'm looking to do is the special exception of a single-family home at 4 Harris Ave. Where it's located, I don't know if you've all driven by it or not. It's the lot to the west of Charlie's Diner. If everyone's familiar with the diner is up there, and I want to describe the neighborhood and what it's kind of in. So the C1 zone up there kind of runs from Daniel Webster Highway to the east, and then it goes the Everett Turnpike to the west, probably north to Bedford Road, and then down to Shaw's Supermarket. So that area is pretty much all defined as C1 zoning. And what I'm looking to do, and if you drive up that road, most of the homes and properties on Daniel Webster Highway, there's only probably a couple commercial properties that are along Daniel Webster Highway. There are a couple multifamilies. Then everything else back behind Daniel Webster Highway still consists of single-family homes. So what I'm looking to do is just improve a single-family property onto that vacant lot at 4 Harris Ave.
Okay. All right. Are there any questions before he goes into the special exemption? All right. If you could just read through A, B, C, and D, and just stop after each one in case there's any questions. Thank you.
The specific site is an appropriate location for such a use in terms of overall community development because it would be in character for the area. There are single-family homes abutting the property in close proximity. They are also in a C1 zone. And then I include, part of the attachments, I included a map which
Right.
shows all the different single families, abutting the property.
Any question? Okay, B?
The uses developed will not adversely affect the neighborhood because there are other single-family homes in the neighborhood. Minimal site work should be needed to develop the site, and the topography of the lot should not substantially change. The home will be connected to town water and sewer, and the proposed use will enhance the neighborhood.
Questions? C?
There will be no nuisance or serious hazard to vehicles or pedestrians because the proposed use will add minimal traffic to the area. The occupant of the proposed use will probably have 2 to 3 vehicles. The extra 2 or 3 cars coming and going should have little impact.
Questions? D?
Adequate and appropriate facilities will be provided for the proper operation of the proposed use or uses because it will be serviced by town water and sewer and will have on-site parking for at least 4 cars.
Questions?
The only question I have, and this is, actually, Robert, this is more for you. Does this require any variances given its placement, or?
At this point, he's not proposing an actual location for the house. It's just for the ability to place one there on the lot. So there's no variance that comes into play at this point.
Okay, so there would be variances that would come into play later?
Not necessarily. If he can find a way to fit the house on the lot that complies with all the setbacks, then he wouldn't need any variance. And
Okay.
he's showing on the plan there is a building envelope in there. It is tight, but if he can find a way to maneuver a house in, then he'll be okay.
Okay, just curious. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions before I open this up to the public? Okay. Is there anybody out there that would like to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anybody out there that would like to speak against this petition? Okay, close the public. Before I close the public, is there any questions? Yes, go ahead.
All right, this house that you're intending to put on this lot now, is that for your use, or are you going to,
You're going to be selling it.
you will be selling it?
Yep. And the owner of the property that I'm buying it from, who lives next door, is aware of that.
Okay.
Okay. Remember correctly, you rehabbed another house, Merrimack, didn't you?
I've done a few, yep.
Yeah,
The
I
most
remember.
recent one I'm doing is the one down by King Cone,
Okay, that's right.
across the street, the new construction one there, so.
All right, unless there's any other questions, I'm going to close the public hearing for discussion. All right, close the public hearing. Discussion items, questions, motions?
I'd like to make a motion to grant APMK Ventures LLC the special exception under section 2.02.2C of the zoning ordinance to permit a single-family dwelling in the C1 district. The parcel is located at 4 Harris Avenue in the C1 Limited Commercial and Aquifer Conservation Districts and Wellhead Protection Area, tax map 60-1, lot 30030.
Okay, second by Kathy. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? 2, 4, 5, 0, 0. Good luck. Thank you.
Very much.
All right. Next up is Arnie LLC, petitioner owner, variance under section 3.02 of the zoning ordinance to permit a 2 sublot division with one lot having 159.22 feet of frontage, whereas 250 feet is required. The parcel is located at 63 Wilson Hill Road in the R1 Residential and Aquifer Conservation Districts, tax map 4B, lot 130, case number 2018-2.
Folks ready for us?
Ready when you are.
Okay, great, thank you. Roy Tilsley and Brett Allard here from Bernstein Shore on behalf of the applicant, Arne LLC. We're filling in for Greg Michael tonight. Takes 2 of us to fill his shoes tonight. We're also joined by Ray Donahue, who's the manager of Arne LLC, concerning the property at 63 Wilson Hill Road. I'm going to turn it over to Brett to talk about the variance that we're requesting for frontage today.
So What we're
Can
essentially
you,
looking.
I'm sorry, can you just make sure the mic's over by you? Got one mic up there, so.
What we're essentially looking at here is a two-lot subdivision. The main lot, so to speak, is 8.2 acres with 282 or so feet of frontage on the Wilson Hill Road. And the second proposed lot for subdivision is 2.3 acres with 159.22 feet of frontage, obviously falling underneath the required 250 feet in for this area. I would just note, and it was in the staff memo as well, so you might be familiar that in 1989, this board approved this same variance for the frontage on the proposed lot. And nothing has changed. That expired because the owners at the time never followed up on some of the things they had to do as far as planning board subdivision approval and whatnot. But this board did approve the same proposal back in '89. I can get into the 5 criteria now.
That would be great. After each criteria, if you could just stop, we might have questions.
Sure. So the variance will not be contrary to the public interest. The variance won't alter the essential character or use of the neighborhood. It's a residential zone. These are going to be 2 houses on separate lots that total 10 acres. It'll meet all other zoning requirements, just like this board found in '89, as far as setbacks go, depth, etc. And the proposed dwelling would be on the new lot at least 400 feet setback from the main road, and it's a pretty wooded area too. So,
Any questions on number 1? Number 2?
the spirit of the ordinance will be observed. The variance will not threaten the health, safety, or welfare of the public. Like I said, these are large lots. The dwellings will be set back from the road. There won't be any increase in traffic if the 2-lot subdivision is approved. The buffer distances and setbacks will be met, all the other dimensional requirements under the zoning ordinance. And it's an area variance, not a use variance. So, like I mentioned in the first, or it's a frontage variance, not a use variance, so that there won't be any alteration to the neighborhood or character of the neighborhood.
So the existing house that's there is going to be raised?
I'm sorry?
Is there an existing house on the lot now? Or?
There's an existing house on the main lot.
Okay.
There's not on the smaller lot that would be the subdivided
Okay.
lot.
All right.
And they're going to share a driveway. There's a shared driveway, so there's not going to be a need for a new driveway.
Okay.
That runs right down. You can see that runs right down the property line between the two.
Okay. Any questions on number 2? Number 3?
Substantial justice will be done. There's no benefit to the public, really, if the variance is denied, but there's a loss to the applicant that would outweigh any injury to the general public if it was denied. There won't be any loss or injury to the general public, and in fact, there will be a benefit because if the second lot can be developed, it would increase the tax base.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I guess the only comment I have for this is the comment here about the board passing this on June 22nd, 1989. A lot has changed since then. That you're looking at different faces, and there's a whole new set of ordinances. So I don't see that as any point of comparison in consideration.
Okay.
So that's all.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I was just got a quick question here. I'm looking at the 2 lot sizes, and there is a great difference between them. And I'm almost looking like maybe you're going to subdivide again.
I don't know the answer to that.
I don't think there's any intention of that. I
But if
can't-
you look at the 2 lot sizes, they're so different.
No, I understand, and I think the idea here was to try to, come in with the plan that had originally been approved and not make any changes to it, which is why we chose this particular configuration. But there certainly there's no current plan to do any further subdivision beyond the 2 lots here. And I'm not, I mean, I haven't looked at it to see whether that would be possible or feasible. I mean, obviously, now you'd be getting into creating
Well,
roads and things like that.
I'm looking now that
Yeah.
you've got a shared driveway, there'd be nothing for another shared driveway in there.
Yeah, but that would be a whole different type of
Right,
process.
well, that's why I'm
Yeah.
asking.
I hear you. And that would require variance relief, because there'd be no frontage at that point.
Right, but we've had those cases before, too. All right.
Any other questions, comments? Number 4?
So the values of the surrounding properties won't be diminished. No diminution of value. Like I said, these are pretty big lots with pretty substantial wooded buffers set back more than 400 feet from the road. It's keeping with the residential nature of the area. You know, there's only one dwelling there now. If a second one goes up, it'd only be 2 dwellings on 10.5 acres and would otherwise comply with all the zoning requirements.
Number 5?
As far as hardship goes, just as this board found in '89, and I understand that a lot has probably changed in that time, and the reason that I bring it up is because what hasn't changed is the legal standard and the proposal. So the proposal at the time was for a variance with the exact same amount of dimensions, the 159 feet of frontage, and certainly the 5 criteria hasn't changed. So that's why I bring that up. And just like this board found back then, there's the topography of the land near that driveway as far as slopes, rocks, and ledges go, make it near impossible to relocate that driveway to increase the frontage. So it's kind of a unique condition of the property that distinguishes it from other properties in the area. And it would meet, actually, the frontage requirements if the soil type was different. But we're looking at severe soils here, which require 250. If it was slight soils, they wouldn't even need a variance. So the proposed use is a reasonable one, like I said, consistent with the residential nature of the area. And, you know, the board carefully analyzed the same proposal in '89 and applied the legal standard, and, you know, nothing's changed, so.
Okay. And number 2, the second part of that?
The proposed use is reasonable, mainly because it's just consistent with the residential nature of the area, and literal enforcement here of the frontage ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship for the owner, where there's really no downfall or adverse impact to the public or surrounding properties.
So, you know, the only unnecessary hardship is if this isn't approved, then the owner doesn't get to build the house there, right? I mean, there's no other, I don't see any other unnecessary hardship. I mean,
Is
right.
there a B?
Yeah, because usually, if you haven't met the first 2 criteria, then there's the second paragraph explaining how unnecessary hardship will be deemed to exist if and only if, owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, the property cannot be reasonably used in strict conformance with the ordinance, and a variance is therefore necessary to enable reasonable use of the property.
I don't see one
No,
completed in here.
Yeah. Usually, we don't generally have people read in B unless if they've met the criteria in the first section of 5. But I'm not.
Well, that, and it's the discretion of the zoning board to determine if that hardship was met, so B is technically part of the document.
Right. If you could speak to that, that's fine. That would be fine for this evening, given where we're at.
Speaking to the unique conditions of the property,
Well, speaking, to the extent of, explaining how unnecessary hardship will be deemed to exist. The only thing I see for unnecessary hardship, and if I'm wrong, please correct me by all means. I just see that, if it's not approved, then he or she doesn't get to build the house. I guess, I don't know if I'm missing something, but if I am, please clue me in.
well, aside from not being able to, the unique features, not being able to relocate the shared driveway to increase the frontage, which would be kind of a unnecessary hardship in that the special conditions of the property distinguish it, and in that regard, the property owner would not be able to essentially subdivide the property and be able to do what he would want as far as future uses go.
Okay.
So just out of curiosity, are you stating that there's no physical way to, because if there's enough frontage for both to have 150 feet, there's no physical way to,
Move the driveway.
yeah, to make changes to the property to allow for two driveways as you would see on two houses?
Well, I think they would both need 250. And I don't think that when you add them the two
Oh,
together, it
okay,
equals
yeah.
500. And additionally, the topography is such that my understanding at least is moving the shared driveway to increase the frontage would obviously subtract the other one below 250, and just on practicality level would be near impossible.
I think in terms of the hardship, clearly the lot can meet all other requirements for a two-lot subdivision. The only issue is the frontage. It's a sufficiently sized lot to support a two-lot subdivision. Given that there's going to be a shared driveway here, which exists and has been used for many years, there does seem to be some hardship here in strictly requiring us to meet the frontage requirements when we're going to use the shared driveway anyway.
The people you're representing, I'm just curious, did they ever say why they didn't complete this? I mean, it sounds like they
No, I mean,
literally
didn't-
got through
They didn't own it in
everything.
1989. My
Okay.
client hasn't owned it
Oh, okay.
for that long, so I don't know the backstory is.
So this was, all, the 1989 approvals were for somebody else who lived there at the time?
Correct,
Okay.
correct. So I don't know the backstory as to why it didn't get completed. And just while I've got the microphone, just to follow up on the point that was made earlier, I have spoken to my client. We are agreeable to a no further subdivision condition that could be recorded. So this will be two lots and that will be it.
Okay.
Okay, and just for your info, I would have asked the same question of Attorney Michael, too.
I know, that's okay. I'm
Yeah,
not-
I like to pick on him.
he needs-
Okay, is there any other questions from the board?
Maybe that's why he's not here.
All right, I'll open this up to the public then. Is there anybody who'd like to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anybody who'd like to speak against this petition? All right, gentlemen, if you could just have a seat over to the side,
Yep.
please. Thank you. And feel free to come down, sign in, state your name and address.
Okay, my name is John Harris. I live at 69 Wilson Hill Road.
Hi, John.
Hi. So as an opening, I'd like to say that I am not in favor of granting a variance to the applicant. And one of the big reasons is it's a backlot development. And that issue should be developed by the community development to how are we going to address this in the future.
Explain what you mean by backlot development.
Well, you don't have enough frontage, so essentially you have large properties with a single home with residual land in the back, which is essentially what this is. So I can go over the points now.
Please.
So the variance, contrary to public interest, I believe the variance is contrary to the public interest as it impacts the integrity of the current zoning ordinances. The spirit of the ordinance, the requested variance is contrary to the spirit of the ordinance as the variance requested is not sufficient to override the zoning ordinance when the current use of the parcel is consistent with the literal enforcement of the zoning ordinance. Substantial justice. I believe there is significant gain to the public interest if the variance is denied. The public interest in the integrity of the current zoning ordinance is maintained, and the variance denial does not cause loss or injury to the property owner. They can keep the same house that they have. As far as the surrounding properties are not diminished, I'm not really sure about that, if they would or they wouldn't be. I'm not an expert in that area. For the hardship, there is no unnecessary hardships. There are other similar properties in the same area with a similar size, acreage, and topology, which are subject to the same zoning requirements and restrictions. And I have one of those properties, which is larger than theirs. The current zoning ordinance imposes the same restrictions on a number of similarly situated landowners. The property in question is not unique or special by the zoning restrictions and is similar to other lots in the area. The zoning restrictions currently in place do not interfere with the current landowner's reasonable use of the property. And the enforcement of the ordinance does not result in unnecessary hardship, as the parcel of land is not unique to the area. Any questions?
Any questions? Comment? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak against the variance? Just come down, sign in, and state your name and address, please.
My name is Rhonda Tapley. So good evening. Was I supposed
Good
to
evening.
say something else?
Good evening, yeah. Where's your address,
Um,
for the record?
65 Wilson Hill Road.
Thank you.
We are the property next door on the west side. My name is Rhonda Tapley. My husband, John, and I own the property at 65 Wilson Hill Road. We are here to oppose the proposed variance for 63 Wilson Hill Road. We believe that approving this variance would be unsafe, unsustainable over time, create animosity between neighbors, and possibly end up in litigation. We purchased our property 32 years ago. We knew the original neighbors. Under the regulations at that time, we could not subdivide our lot. We chose to sell the back portion to an abutter, John.
All right.
And we built our home on the remaining section with the promise that he would never put pink condos there. Our home and the existing home at 63 Wilson Hill Road are the only two homes on what we refer to as the hill. Structurally, there is nothing about that lot that is any more unique than ours. They are both sited at approximately the same distance and elevation from the road. Both lots consist mainly of severe soils and lack sufficient road frontage to subdivide under current regulations. Both lots have complex driveways. The location of each of our driveways has been determined by the contours of the land and the ledge. Arnie LLC is requesting what appears to be a simple variance to create an easement, share a driveway, and create a second lot. Because this is a critical point to this application, we would like to share with you our extensive knowledge and experience with the driveways. If approved, this would be the only shared driveway like it on Wilson Hill Road. We have very few, and those lots share an entrance at the road and/or a small section that is relatively flat with an unobstructed line of sight. That is not the case here. This is what we know to be true. The driveway is the highest continuous maintenance aspect of the property on the hill. Maps and photos on a dry, sunny day do not accurately depict the reality of how complex the driveways are or fully represent the everyday challenges of traveling up and down them. There's a wide opening at the bottom on this driveway with unobstructed views of the road in both directions. The driveway enters perpendicular to the road. The opening at the base is large, and any water that runs off the driveway stays at the base. That's good news for the town and the neighbors because it doesn't drain across the road. The bad news for the owner is that the water freezes like a pond in the winter and can make a running start to get up the hill a challenge. The driveway is paved and currently in need of repair. It is narrow, it pitches to the west as it curves to the east, and has a blind spot in the center of the steepest part of the slope as it rises over the ledge. This section of the driveway is blind in both directions. The driveway turns slightly west again and straightens out at the top where the property is more level. At that point, the driveway turns toward the parking area of the existing home. In the winter, because of the slopes and the curves, these driveways are costly and require extensive maintenance. It does not make a difference if the surface is paved or gravel. In the winter, we have to get the snow and ice off the hill in real time in order for it to be passable. It's not just the big storms that are a problem. Small storms, freezing rain, or melting snow that refreezes overnight can take just as much time and energy because you have to treat it with sand. It does not matter if it's a light skim of ice or a foot of snow. A blind spot on the steepest section and 2 cars traveling in opposite directions creates a hazard. These driveways are too long and steep to use walk-behind snowblowers. If you choose to remove the snow yourself, you have to get out there day or night to clear it because you cannot allow it to freeze. It could stay frozen and impassable for weeks. When the professionals plow, they plow every 6 inches because any more than that is very difficult to push up the hill on the first pass. Because these driveways are complex, they charge more. The last professional we paid charged $65 per pass. If the storm had over 6 inches and it required 2 passes, we paid double. We have had winters with little snow where we have paid $300. We have had winters where we have paid $1,500 and then some, and had to hire a professional with a tractor, with a bucket to pile the snow. After all that, because we're the road to nowhere, we are usually one of the last roads cleaned up, at which point the town plows in the opening to the driveway. If you have a professional, they have to come back and make a final cleanup. Otherwise, the owner has to clean it up before it freezes and blocks the entrance. Driveway protocol on the hill is that the car going down the hill cannot back up because you can't get traction. The car coming up the hill has to back down. In slippery conditions on this driveway, because the driveway tilts into the woods, the car backing down can slide off the driveway into the woods. You are lucky if the car goes down straight. If not, the car spins and ends up sideways, stuck in the middle. In years past, each of the previous owners next door made different choices about how to maintain their driveway with very different results. As we've lived there, there's been 2 previous owners. Lorraine McKinnon, who originally built the house, hired a professional to plow and sand. Occasionally, her daughter parked at the base of the driveway if it had not been plowed and hiked up. Mark and Debbie Noizo made a different choice. Every winter, they had cars go off the driveway, end up in the woods on the bank, and would have to get them pulled out. The current owners have already experienced the hill. Their construction workers got stuck on the slope when there was minimal snow and had to back down and park at the bottom and lug their materials up on foot. Over the years, we have hired professionals to plow our driveway, and we have sanded it ourselves. This requires multiple trips to pick up buckets of sand from the DPW. 2 years ago, we purchased a tractor, and now we handle the snow removal and sanding ourselves. We have never slid off our driveway. That has been our choice as to how we address our driveway. All of these decisions are challenging enough for one homeowner without having to get neighbors involved. Anyone that lives on Wilson Hill Road has made a choice to live here with all of its beauty and despite the challenges. Living out here requires respecting nature and working with it. It is a beautiful country road in a rural area. There is no public water or sewer. We are usually the last road to be plowed. We are on multiple grids. Many times we're the first to lose power and the last to have it restored. This is not a cluster development. We are the road to nowhere. We are very protective of our natural resources. We all value our privacy. Living on the hill has additional challenges. It requires understanding your personal family routines and anticipating who is entering and leaving. Traveling up and down the driveway may not impact residents on the road, but it will certainly impact the 2 homeowners living in close proximity expected to share that driveway. We believe that increasing traffic on a driveway that already has challenges and a blind spot, possibly being shared by multiple homeowners with different schedules, is a hazard. We believe safety should come first. We do not believe that any possible written agreement between 2 neighbors under these conditions can be sustained or enforced over time. This leaves us with many concerns, some that cannot be answered. Is this driveway, under current conditions, according to our current regulations, able to be accessed in an emergency? If proper repairs are not made, does this make the driveway impassable for emergency vehicles? Will there be enough room at the top to turn around a full-size emergency vehicle with 2 homes in this space? Who will pay for the maintenance, repairs, and snow removal? What if one neighbor is experiencing a physical or financial hardship or cannot afford the expense? What if one of the neighbors refuses to pay to have something repaired and a repair is required? How would any agreement be enforced? What would the remedy be, and how costly would that become? What if the neighbors are not considerate to each other? In this instance, you are asking people who do not know each other to live in harmony, and neither homeowner will have any right to force the other to agree with their choices. There's no condominium association with rules and covenants about living there. We believe that granting this variance is a safety hazard, and that any written agreements will be unsustainable over time and may create a lasting hardship to anyone that may choose to live there. We are requesting that the board denies this application. I can answer for you if you want, or if you need that answers, about both previous owners, if you have questions about any of that.
Were you living in that house when the when it was first, the 1989?
We purchased our property in December of 1986. We started building in 87, and we completed in 88. John and I talked about this the other day, trying to remember, what all happened. We were in the, we had no experience at the time, and we've been out there now, almost 32 years. We had no experience at the time about the driveways in the winters. I don't even recall except for the year that we built. There was a couple of years that there really wasn't that much snow. So I wouldn't have been able to really give you any experience about that. We don't recall ever coming or hearing anything about a variance. I know that Mrs. M, we referred to her as Mrs. M because we knew her, she and her daughter and her granddaughter lived there. She never had any intention of building another house. There was never any intention to build another house there, so I'm not really sure what the intention was at the time. I knew she wanted to move to Canada. That's what she did. If she's still alive, she's in her 90s. And everyone moved away.
Okay, so, all right, so you.
And I think that's
kind of
probably
just one
why
more
she
question.
never followed through, because the board did send letters 3 times to her saying, in order for us to finalize this file, we need you to finish up the final clause. And what they asked for was that the town, I have it here, the town was going to say that they were not going to be responsible for the easement, and then the rest of it was going to be solely responsible for Lorraine, Diana McClure, her daughter, and all their heirs and assigns. So if the board had approved it, if they had continued to move forward with what was the original proposal, they would have required, I'll call it, if you don't mind.
Actually,
They would have required.
Okay, they can't hear you.
You need to.
Take the mic over there.
Yeah, take the portable
microphone's
mic. I'm sorry, there's a
right there.
portable mic right over there. Sorry about that. No, it's okay. Is it
I
on?
hope I don't talk to, am I talking too loud?
Yeah, there you go.
The original house sits here. Okay, we're over here. And actually, our home is at the same distance from the road. They're proposing to put the house in here, so it'd be at the same height. This driveway doesn't look like that.
No, we actually have overheads of it. We
So
consider
the
those.
driveway doesn't look like that. So they were proposing that this house be solely responsible for all of the repairs and everything that has to get done to that driveway.
Right.
That driveway is currently in disrepair. It's pavement. I don't even know if it's wide enough for an emergency vehicle, et cetera, et cetera. And so there was no way that you could ever put that burden on one homeowner.
Right.
How do you put the burden on 2 homeowners? Because now 2 homeowners, you could say, well, gee whiz, we're going to share this. However, take the second homeowner that owned this house. Mark and Debbie never repaired the driveway. They never did anything. If I had bought this house and I had to live next door to them, and they never repaired anything, what's the recourse?
Right. That where you're kind of getting into stuff that's. I understand
Not
where you're
here.
coming from, but it's
Yeah.
not. It's not the privy of the zoning board to make
Sure.
a call on stuff like on who repairs a driveway or who plows a driveway. That's really not what we're looking at is, the variance to actually allow a lot with smaller frontage than what is normally allowed by the town.
Except for
But
the
I
fact
understand the points you're bringing up.
Well, except for the fact that they're trying to rely on what the board decided years ago that was never followed through on. And that's
Right.
what I'm trying to explain there. That's what the board was asking for as the third and final portion, and that never occurred.
Okay.
That's what stopped.
Right.
So, yeah, that makes that.
No, I appreciate the insight. I did have a question. You started off your letter, and I didn't write it down. You started off
You can
saying
have
that
it
there
if
was
you
unfortunately, I can't take it, but
Okay.
there would be can you read the first couple sentences?
What I said was, that sentence I think you said, "We believe that approving this variance would be unsafe, unsustainable over time, create animosity between neighbors, and possibly end up in litigation."
Okay, so you're referencing what you talked about later about the driveway and people
Right.
that animals. Okay, I didn't know if you're referring to the two houses there, you're referring to yourself and the
No.
neighbors or anything like that.
No.
Okay.
Them putting a second house on that lot does not directly affect us. In other words, it's because it's over there. That's not the issue. The issue is, we have a 250-foot road frontage for a reason,
Mhm.
because we live in a rural area. That is the point of that area. It's not a cluster development. We're not a condo. That's the reason why we bought out there.
Okay.
So to all of a sudden say, well, we need it smaller, I don't see the hardship. I live on a piece of property just like that. It's not a hardship. Otherwise, that means that I can tear my house down, and anyone in town on this road now can come to the board. If they allow this driveway to pass through, that means that any of us, including John, who has a large lot, he could just start ripping houses all the way up in the back.
If he wanted to come in file for a variance, yes, he
Exactly.
most certainly could. You could.
Right.
You're absolutely right.
But once you do it, it gets set as a precedent, and then how can you turn around and stop it? That's
a
our
good
issue.
point.
I would say the only fortunate thing is, similar to the 1989 thing, because each case is unique, I don't think it would set a precedence. And we haven't been in a situation where a precedence has been set. So, in this type of situation, I mean, where subdividing is occurring. Although you do bring up a very good point that, although the shared driveway thing, I believe that's a planning board thing.
Yeah, it's not us. We're just looking at frontage. That's
Yeah.
all we're
Robert?
looking at.
Would this set a precedence if, in your opinion?
No, everything's done by a case-by-case basis.
But it is a good point.
To say that we could reinstate this, I looked at the file, I looked at Lorraine McKinnon's file back in there, and there were some notes that were written in there that clearly stated that approval was void, because she never followed through with it.
Yes.
She never completed what she needed. So this variance now, from our understanding.
Is a brand-new variance.
Is a brand-new variance
Mhm.
that starts all over again and cannot rely on whatever the previous board did. Am I
I think
correct?
that'll always
Yeah,
be true.
we brought that up. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we're
That is
aware of
true.
that,
Yeah,
so.
it's absolutely true.
It is. This is a new variance. So.
If I could,
Yeah.
can I just get a copy of that letter,
Yeah.
if it's okay with you?
Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you
Is
very
there
much.
anybody else that would like to speak against this petition? Hi. Come on in, sign in, and state your name and address. Did you swear in this
I'm new
earlier?
as Doris Voss.
Yes, you did,
All right.
yes.
Okay. Hi.
Hi. My name is Doris Voss. I live at 55 Wilson Hill Road. Our land abuts the piece of property in question, and I stand opposed to this variance approval. The piece of property has a 159.22 foot frontage, where 250 feet is required. That is a 90-foot difference. We're not talking about 9 feet, but 90 feet is a long ways. They wrote in their application that the house will be 400-plus feet back We are not here to discuss how far off the road the house will be, but how much frontage there is.
Correct.
There simply is not enough frontage. When the current owner, who recently bought this property, they had to have known the issue with the frontage. From the name, I assume he's a builder. All of this, all the more reason he should have known about this. Another concern I have is the brook that runs down the length of our property. Some of it on their property, but mostly on ours, and drains finally under the road through a culvert and past the houses that are on that side of the road and into the Sauhegan River. So, once they put the septic system in, I'm concerned about there will be a problem with any runoff that will run into the brook. Because there is so much ledge up there, they want to, whoops, excuse me, I gotta find my
okay.
page here.
Take your time.
They want to build, there would be any, I wonder if there would be any blasting. I am very concerned about the wells up there. We do have to conserve our water. We do not have water or septic up there. We knew when we moved up there, we didn't. So that wasn't an issue. Finally, we would be able to see the house. They said in the application that no one would be able to even know it's there. We will be able to see it. And we can see the house that is there now. And I had just had a question. There's a lot of pink and blue flags, the full length of our property, on our property. And I wonder who did this and who gave them the right to come on the property and what the flags are for.
Rob?
Yep.
If
I'm a
you-
little hard of hearing.
Okay, if you have flags on the property, they're probably survey markers, so somebody was doing some surveying. I don't know for sure because I'd have to actually physically see them.
Would be dig safe.
But yeah, also you have to have companies like Dig Safe to make sure they can dig in there and all of that. Why they're on your property, I don't know.
Yeah, because there's a lot of them.
But I don't know, and I don't actually, unfortunately, I don't have an answer to
They
that.
could think of the answer.
So,
Okay.
is there anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Very much.
Thank you.
So we want to bring the,
Yeah, well, gentlemen, you want to come back? Oh, wait, you'd also like to speak against, okay? Sure, sir, come on down, sign in, and just state your name and address.
Bob Hayes, 62 Wilson Hill Road, across the street from this proposed development.
Yes.
I just want to touch on three things.
Sure.
One of our concerns is wells.
Mhm.
At least two of the wells in the immediate vicinity went dry for a period of time this past summer. Concerned about a new well for yet another home would cause that to be more of an issue. Septic runoff, not that it goes into the Sauhegan, it does eventually, but that brook that she was talking about goes under the road and it flows down and becomes a wetland behind my neighbor at 60 Wilson Hill Road. So it never actually drains into the Sauhegan directly. And hardship, developer from out of town comes in, buys a piece of property, knows there's an issue, they can't do it 2 lots according to the zoning laws, and now wants a variance for it. If we're supposed to have zoning laws, they should protect the citizens of this town. And that's very concerning that we're not standing up for that and protecting the people that live in this town already. So, thank you.
Thank you.
it's a valid point, thank you.
Anybody else want to speak against this petition? Gentlemen, if you'd like to come back up front.
I had a couple of questions for him.
Let's just let them address what they need to address.
Yeah, when they're done.
I got you.
A couple of quick points in response. We obviously heard a lot about the driveway. The driveway is laid out on our survey is accurate according to our surveyor. He stamped it. We believe that accurately depicts the driveway that's
Okay.
there today. Obviously, the issue as to the ability of this driveway to support 2 homes as opposed to 1 home is going to be an issue for the planning board. Certainly, my client understands that as part of the subdivision process, he's going to have to show the board that the driveway is safe, and he understands that that is likely going to involve redoing the driveway, because there are issues with the driveway as it sits today. You know, at a single-family house, he can continue to use it. Obviously, if he wants to subdivide it and increase the intensity, he's going to have to satisfy the planning board. But what I heard in terms of the, I guess the connection to the roadway is that there's plenty of room there. There's good sight lines there. So from the perspective of this particular variance, I think the evidence supports that there is sufficient room and that the driveway that's there exists and can support two homes, at least at the roadway. Obviously, the other issues will need to be addressed by the planning board before my client gets subdivision approval. In terms of the flags that one of the abutters mentioned, our understanding is that the surveyor has marked the property line with flags. We believe those flags are on the property line. Certainly, if there's an allegation that they're not, we can let the surveyor know and have them revisit it.
Would you give the lady the name of the surveyor so she can call him?
I will
and
do
make
it
sure?
before we go home tonight, sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, no problem. Brett?
Any other comments?
I guess, the last piece, we talked about hardship. Again, I think we talked earlier about the topography and the amount of ledge and where the driveway has to go here. That's what I view particularly as the unique situation on this particular property, which justifies a variance. Obviously, we have to upgrade the driveway as part of planning, but in terms of its connection to the road system, we believe it's sufficient. The lot supports two lots in every other respect, except for frontage, and given that we're going to use a shared driveway with good sight lines, we do believe we meet the criteria for a variance. Obviously, my client is a developer. We always hear this when we come in, but the issue here is not. The issue here is whether we meet the criteria for a variance. If we do, my client's entitled to one, whether he's a lifelong resident or a brand-new developer. That's the criteria. I know you folks know that and understand it, but that should be what guides your decision today. Thank you.
Okay, Fran, go ahead.
Yeah, question of the brook that crosses the property. Would you show it to me on there, please?
I know there's some wetlands down in this area that kind of come along the.
Can you go on mic, please? Thanks.
There are some wetlands that cut across the, I guess it would be the easterly property line down here on the bottom. I have reviewed this and hadn't seen a brook delineated on it, so I'm not sure.
Well, that's why I'm asking, because I don't see anything on here. If there is a brook that crosses that property, and is the building of the houses going to interfere with that brook?
My client indicates that there is not a brook crossing the property. Obviously, our surveyor doesn't show it, so that's what we're relying on at this point. But my client has been there, doesn't see a brook. Obviously, those types of issues in terms of drainage will have to be dealt with at the planning board as part of the subdivision.
That's correct, but they mentioned the brook, so that's why I'm asking.
It's not, it's not something that we're aware of, and it's not delineated on the plan, most importantly. Certainly, the surveyor would pick that up.
Okay,
What other questions?
I'm all set.
Board, any other questions, comments from the board?
Nope.
Anybody else want to speak against this? Okay, I'm going to close. If there's no other comments, questions, I'm going to close the public hearing for discussion. So there's a couple things come to mind when I look at this. One, I'm looking at the plan here in the proposed well radius and where the 4,000 square foot leach field is. I don't know where they plan on putting the house, but I have a feeling they're going to come back in here looking for a variance on setbacks, because I don't know if they're going to be able to squeeze that in. Again, depending on the size of the house they're gonna build. If they're gonna build something small, maybe. But I could see a setback, you coming back for setbacks. That's just my personal opinion. I don't, my personal opinion, my take on it is, I don't really think a couple of the criteria were met. I think hardship and substantial justice were two of them. And granting the variance contrary to public interest. Those saw some concerns on those, the explanations on those, and maybe they need further explanation. But specifically hardship. So that's just kind of my 2 cents on it. Lenny, thoughts? Rich?
I mean, so to your point, granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. Tonight's testimony has proven that not to be accurate. Unnecessary hardship. I mean, I'm just requiring 250 feet of frontage accomplishes no reasonable purpose. So what does that mean in Merrimack? We should allow 1 foot frontage for every. I mean, that's absolutely not an unnecessary. There's no unnecessary hardship listed under 5A, and we don't have one for 5B. So I think missing an entire criteria makes this kind of difficult to vote
Yep.
on.
Kathy? Comments, questions?
I'm not sure if I agree with this.
Turn your mic on.
I don't think that, I think we have to take everything case by case, and I understand 190 and 250 is a big variance, but I think that we should, I would be willing to let it go on to planning and see if they have any issues with it, because I don't have an issue with 190 as opposed to 250.
Fran, questions, comments?
I do have a comment. You made the comment whether the,
Well, public's closed, so those are my comments on that. I closed the public hearing, so
Okay.
this is just the board.
okay, well, the comment was made that whether it be a new construction or an old construction company, they should be treated the same in town. Well, whether it's a new resident or an old resident, they should be treated the same also.
Okay, so do I have a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to deny Arnie LLC.
I'm going to go the other way.
Oh, I'm sorry. I will
You have to.
rescind my motion.
All right, I'll make the motion. Motion to approve Arnie LLC variance, petitioner owner variance under section 3.02 of the zoning ordinance to permit a 2-lot subdivision with 1 lot having 159.22 feet of frontage, whereas 250 feet is required. The parcel is located at 63 Wilson Hill Road in the R1 Residential and Aquifer Conservation District's tax map 4B, lot 130, case number 2018-02. This is a motion to approve. Do I have a second? Kathy's seconding. Okay. So motion to approve. All in favor, say aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Aye. And a 0. So it's 1-4-0.
Okay?
Please read in the motion, Rich.
All right, so I'm going to make the motion to deny Arnie LLC variance under section 3.02 of the zoning ordinance to permit a 2-lot subdivision with 1 lot having 159.22 feet of frontage, whereas 250 feet is required. Parcels located at 63 Wilson Hill Road in the R1 Residential and Aquifer Conservation Districts, tax map 4B, lot 130, case 2018-02.
Citing.
And the reason for the denial is because unnecessary hardship criteria was not met.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor of denying the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? 4-1-0. Gentlemen, the motion is denied.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. All right. Lenny, have a good evening. Lenny will be recusing himself? Okay. We're going to take a quick 5-minute recess. Oh, by the way, I beat your record last week. Guys, you ready? Okay, thank you for the slight intermission. I just wanted to have some of the folks that were here for the previous petitions, give them a chance to move out. All right, so the final petition for this evening is David Paul and Tony Paul, petitioner owners, rehearing of an appeal of administrative decision, previous case number 2017-34, as per the requirements of RSA 674:41 regarding the issuance of a residential building permit for a lot without frontage on a Class 5 or better roadway pursuant of the statutory appeal process. The parcel is located at 312B Babusick Lake Road in the R Residential District, tax map 6A-2, lot 156-09, case number 2018-04. And Lenny has recused himself, so Rod will be sitting in for Lenny as an active member for this appeal.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
How are you doing?
Good evening. Good. My name is Joe Mitchell. I'm an attorney in town here, and I represent the applicant, who is Tony Paul. Tony Paul is seated here in the front. She is the record owner of this parcel. When we applied for this situation, this property was in a trust of which she was the trustee, and the trust has since been dissolved, and now she is the sole title owner. With her is David N. Paul, who is a former trustee and her husband, and with me at the table is David S. Paul, who is the son of the people I just introduced. We are seeking the ZBA to authorize the building to authorize the building official to issue a building permit for a dwelling unit that is proposed. There is already a unit that is built on this premises. It's 36 by 48 feet. And so what we're really asking for is effectively a change in use since the building is already erected. To the building itself, we're wanting to hook up change the electrical service, hook up to a new and safer septic system, replace an existing deck on the eastern side, which is the side away from the lake, and replace it with a new deck on the western side. And again, the building is already present.
If you may, we've heard, I know we've heard and we've talked about the building and I know that the appeal was granted based on, was it the easements? The easements. That I think that we didn't have that information the last time. It would be helpful, obviously you can finish recapping what they're looking for, but if you could talk about the easements, because that was the basis for the appeal when it was originally denied, to get this reheared again.
I think I appealed it. Yeah, I think I appealed it on the grounds that when we were reading the statute, we weren't reading it the entire way through. Not myself, but somebody who was on the board who's not here tonight. And she was not including the part of the statute that allows for a pathway of constructing a building on a private road. Mm-hmm. She went through the part of the statute that said it was prohibited, but she didn't go through the part of the statute that said it would be allowed if you did certain things.
Okay.
And that's really the basis for the appeal.
So based upon that statute, that's what we're here back this evening to rehear this.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Plus, there are several people here, at least one, who didn't hear the original fact presentation, and I thought since you would be voting on this, that would be necessary for us to go through that again.
By all means, and I just wanted to make sure that we did talk about the easements, because that's why we're back here this evening as well.
Okay.
So, all right.
I'm going to present an overview of the history of this parcel, and then Mr. Paul, who's seated with me, is going to go through more of the detail of it. There were, in 1987, there were 5 units on the lake that were serviced by something called Gutter Lane. Gutter Lane is shown on the map that I submitted with my materials. It shows the new easement, and it also shows the old Gutter Lane. Of those 5 housing units, 3 have been removed, 1 has been replaced, and that leaves a total of 3 units that are now serviced by this Gutter Lane. In 1987, the Pauls owned a cottage that they decided to, they owned 2 cottages, the family did, to take down an old cottage that was on the lake and its septic system, and replace it with a barn which is set back considerably from the lake. And as you may know, there are a lot of septic systems in this part of town. This is a plan that originated in 1916 that were put in way below current standards, so that's been rectified. In June of 1987, a building permit was issued for the Pauls to construct a 36 by 48 garage-barn. Again, this was to replace a cottage that was on the lake that was torn down because it was thought that it would be safer to take that unit down and to replace it with this other structure. And again, that's been there since 1987. In 1995, 94-95, an apartment was added to the second floor of the 36 by 48 foot garage barn. There was a service request that is part of the materials submitted by one of the parties opposing us for this application. And in it, an abutter who is an Audrey Gutter asked the town to come out and take a look at the property because she felt there was an obvious apartment on the second floor of the barn, and she was told, one of the town officials went out and viewed it and made a note of it in the town records. Mrs. Gutter was told by the Pauls at that time that they had a friend staying with the Pauls who was going to move into the garage, and again, that's March of 1995. In 1996, the Pauls started being taxed on this property as a unit that had a living space, and that increased, of course, their taxation, and that continues to the present day. In January 1997, this parcel...
Make sure you bring the mic with you, please. Thank you.
Prior to 1997, the parcel on which the barn sits had access through a Jeb Road, which is an old non-town road that was created in that first plan of 1916, and they were asked to give up their right to go on Jeb Road to help out a neighbor on this property, because the neighbor wanted to construct a building that was going to block the road, and the Pauls allowed her to do so. That's the Langer property next door. Now, to further improve the septic situation there, the Well, the gutter property sold to the Gray family, and it's held in a trust for the Gray family, a revocable trust. And in October 2016, a septic design was approved to take the septic material from the Paul residence, which is there, and also from the Gray house, which they own and don't presently live in, and also made it big enough for the apartment in the barn garage to all use the same septic system to improve, again, everybody's ability to dispose of waste on these 3 units. And then in March 2017, we began the process with the town to get approvals for effectively changing the use of the present property that was originally built in 1987, not property, but the unit, the 36 by 48 barn that was originally approved in 1987.
So the barn was approved in 1987, but it was approved as a barn and a garage, not as a dwelling unit per se.
Correct.
And then, if I'm remembering my dates, 95 someone started living there?
95, yes, sir.
And was that cleared with the town, or I may have missed that part?
It was apparently not cleared with the town.
Okay. But they're being taxed on it?
They were being taxed. Within a year, the taxation was changed.
Ah, okay.
And in 1995, somebody from the Sally Raymond, who used to work for the building department, her notes are in the town's file to indicate that she went out there with Mrs. Gutter and saw that there was a dwelling unit on the second floor.
I see, okay. And so what we're looking for, just to catch everybody up, is you're looking to make improvements, including a new septic and electrical and all of that, if I remember correctly.
Yes, sir. The septic is done.
Okay.
The two main houses, the Paul residence and the Gray house, which is next door to us, they're hooked in, and we want to hook in the apartment, which is on the second floor of the barn garage.
What's it hooked into now?
I'm not sure.
But it's been an apartment since '95.
Yes.
But you don't know you guys don't know what it's hooked into?
It's a homemade system.
Ah, okay. Excuse me. All right, Fran?
Oh, a lot of dates being thrown around there. I'm going back to 1987 for a second. The statement was made that in '87 there was a floor put in on the top level of the barn.
The barn was always designed to have a second floor, a first floor for vehicles and a second floor that was open.
Okay, so the second floor was open and the flooring was put in 1987. Is that correct?
No, the flooring was put in 1995.
95.
Okay.
I cover all of this.
There's a couple of folks that just.
Yeah.
I haven't been here for 2 meetings now, so I'm trying to get caught up.
Okay.
So that's what you want to do, is keep that as an apartment up there? On the
Yes.
top level?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right.
Go ahead, Rob.
You had mentioned that it became an apartment in '95 and you started being taxed around '96. Was there an official town meeting that approved it being a dwelling? It sounded like it went from a barn to somebody moving in, to somebody coming and say, yeah, you've got it, and then the following year you were taxed. Was there a planning board meeting or a zoning board meeting kind of thing that there's documentation on file about this?
There's no record of that, no.
Town appraisal. When the town appraised it in '96, brought them through the apartment, and from that point on, they taxed it as an apartment.
Right, what I'm asking is there any documentation in town hall
Not that
changing
we
it
know
from
of.
a garage to a dwelling?
Not that we know of.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
other questions? Rich, Ted? Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yes, sir, there
Before we
is.
Open it up?
Yes. I'd like to talk about my memorandum of law, if I may. The parcel on which this barn and garage and now apartment is located is 1.4 acres. And again, we're not changing the footprint. We're not erecting a building, but we are effectively changing its use. And erecting is important because erecting is the word that the statute uses, which was passed in 2005, well after we erected this building. The one next door to us, that Gutter Lane goes through, is a very large parcel. It's 4.7 acres. And one of the things that this is designed to do, the present Gutter Lane access to the Paul property, and then next door to where this barn is, this is the barn back in this area. This is the house in this area here. And presently, the Gutter Lane goes east to west and then turns around and goes up to service the house and also to service the barn. Now, the length of Gutter Lane through there is 1,050 feet, and it passes within 75 feet of the next-door neighbor's property, which is owned by the Grays. We're trying to shorten the right-of-way from 1,050 feet to about 800 feet, as is shown on the shaded area of the plan, and not come nearly as close to the Grays' property. The new easement would be about 350 feet from the Gray property. The statute that's talked about in the town's memorandum done by Mr. Price, and also in my memorandum of law, is RSA 674:41. And it states that no building shall be erected on any lot within any part of the municipality, and the building permit shall not be issued for the erection of a building. Now, this property, again, was erected well before this statute was passed on September 3rd, 2005. But you can have access to it by a private road, and there are other properties in town that have gone through this property, I'll talk about before I'm through, that do use a private road or a private access. Anyway, the rest of RSA 674:41D is what we didn't discuss the last time, because the last time we didn't discuss whether or not there was a roadmap to use a private road, and the statute specifically provides for it. And we're asking that if you allow us to have this building permit, that you put on there as a condition that we have to comply with this statute, which is one of the ones that's mentioned in the memorandum of Mr. Price. You can have a roadway access a property over a private road if there is a review by the local government governing body, which in this case is the town council, and there is review and comment by the planning board, and they vote to authorize the building permit as well. Also, we have to note to the public that the municipality neither assumes responsibility for maintenance of the private road or any liability for damages resulting from the use thereof, which we are very happy to do. And lastly, before the issuance of a building permit, we have to produce evidence that there is notice of those municipal responsibility limits recorded in the Registry of Deeds, which we're also very happy to do to meet this requirement if we can get through the process with the town council and with the planning board. The statute further provides, we talked about this the last time, so I probably shouldn't discuss it again. We talked about the practical difficulty that is remediated by having a shorter easement further from a neighbor's house, and whether or not there's an unnecessary hardship, again, which this remediates. The statute specifically gives the power to this board to authorize or issue a permit subject to such conditions as it may impose if the issuance of the permit of the building would not tend to distort the official map, which this will not, or increase the difficulty of carrying out the master plan, which this will not affect the master plan, and the erection of the building will not cause hardship to future purchasers or undue financial impact on the municipality. And of course, this will increase, well, it'll keep the present tax rate because we're already paying for it as a residence. Now, this may seem to be a road newly trodden. I didn't have in my materials the effect of a similar application. There is a property at 81 Woodward Road, which has some similarities to this one. I have a copy of a plan and an easement, and I don't know whether I can submit it or whether I can just show it to you and I can take it back.
We can't accept any materials the night of a meeting.
I'm trying to shortcut what I have to say, otherwise I'll have to describe what it is.
I mean, describing the road itself through the easement, or?
No, there are other properties in town like this.
Mhm.
So I don't want this to appear as though we're asking for something that has really not been done before. But in 2011, this board and the planning board and it must have been the Board of Selectmen, that would have been the town council, reviewed an application on a very similar property on Woodward Road. And Woodward Road is in the northwest part of town, and it runs between Merrimack and crosses over the Babusick Brook into Bedford. And just before you get to where Parkhurst Road comes in from the left, there is an old abandoned railroad bed that runs through there from east to west, and it runs all through that part of the town. I'm not sure what the legal situation is with railroad takings. I think it varies with how old it is, but the town takes the position now that the town owns it. And I don't know whether that was taken for taxes, or whether it was deeded to the town, or the town got it some other way, but the town believes that they own that. It's wrong to call it a right-of-way because it's more than that. It's a narrow parcel of land that is the old railroad bed. And in 2011, the people at 81 Woodward Road came in and asked the town for an easement over the old railroad bed, even though that's town land that belongs to everybody, so that they could go about 560 feet back along the old railroad bed to access this otherwise landlocked parcel. And the town eventually allowed them to use that. They gave them a non-exclusive, the town gave them a non-exclusive easement to use the railroad bed to go back 560 feet. And again, this is a private road, or a private right-of-way in this case, to reach this lot so they could build a house, and the house was built. And a deed was recorded at the Registry of Deeds to give them a non-exclusive driveway easement deed, even though the property belongs to everybody in the town. So we think there is some precedent for this. This is not something that hasn't been done before. It's done under the present statutory framework. And we think that, we're in a little bit better shape because we're not asking for the town to use any of its land. We're asking for the town to change the use over a private road that's privately owned.
So can I just ask, when did the zoning board approve that?
2011.
2011?
2011.
I think I was on the fourth one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the statute was is from 2005.
Do you happen to know if it was an appeal or a variance?
It was two things. It was both. They were asking for a variance because they were subdividing some land back there. They had about 20 total little over 20 total acres, and they wanted to make it into two landlocked 10-acre parcels and deed the one 10-acre parcel to a neighbor. That was the variance part of it because that didn't comply with it. And then they were doing the same thing we're doing, where they were applying to get a building permit
But that was an appeal of administrative decision that they, I'm just curious, specifically, was it an appeal of administrative decision?
Mr. Price has been educating me on, not on this particular property, I mean, he educated me on the Paul property, but I don't know about the other property.
I believe that case did go through the appeal of administrative decision process the same way it was spelled out in state law, just as the Pauls are doing now.
We were on the board then.
Yeah.
Yeah, that it was
Remember the case.
So just out of
Dan
curiosity.
Dwyer case,
Um,
if you remember that.
Yeah, we know, yeah, another case.
What precedence did that set when it was?
It doesn't set any
Things that
precedent
doesn't-
because the format for appealing to you guys to get the ability to put a building permit on a landlocked parcel is spelled out specifically in the RSA. So unlike a typical appeal administrative decision where it could set precedent, this one doesn't, because it says this is what they have to do. They have to come here and follow this specific path.
Okay. And the only other question I had was that I was trying to, and pardon me, I'm just trying to understand this. The easement document, going to 674-41-3, basically states that you can use an easement. However, it's got to meet all of Section 1, and some of these are I'm not sure that it meets. So-
Well, we would ask that this be conditionally approved, and that we would have to conform our easement to whatever the town thought that we need to have with regard to different language, or make it broader or narrower.
Anything else, Rich?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Kathy, Rod, any questions?
So I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna say, anything else you wanted to add before I open this up for the public?
I just got one question.
So the overall scheme here is that there are going to be cross easements, or differing easements for, between the two lot owners. The Grays would be giving us an easement to get to a shorter route so that we could get to this barn garage and then go by the barn and garage and access our house. We'd be giving up the old traveled way that we've been using for years and years, which is longer anyway. And on the other hand, we would be giving an easement to the Gray property next door for them to use our boat ramp with a turnaround area so that they would have a permanent access to the lake.
Okay. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Sure, sorry.
All of that is conditioned upon getting through this process, and all of those easements and the plan are being held in escrow pending approval or denial of, again, going through the process with the town.
Okay.
Mr. Paul would like to address the board as well, if he may.
Sure.
May I ask a question first?
Thank you for hearing this again.
Yep.
So our desire is to remodel the already existing property on Babusick Lake Road. And the following is a brief overview explaining the need for the change we're requesting. And it's a continuation of a plan we've had since 1987, when the town did allow us to take down the old cottage and replace it with a new garage with an apartment above, with the potential apartment above. The improvements we plan will only benefit our neighbors, and also will continue to protect the lake and the shoreline environment. First of all, the reason we are here is because the permit filed March 7th, 2017 to remodel the existing apartment, add a deck, upgrade the electrical service for safety was denied due to the existing dwelling having no current road frontage, as showed here, to legally access the property at this point. It did have access prior, until my mom and dad lent the legal paper right-of-way to the Langers next door so they could build their attached garage. My folks gave them the paper right-of-way as a friendly neighbor when they asked. They agreed to return the favor for another right-of-way that would be back accessed for us back further in the Langers property. Later, in the mid-'90s, the Langer sisters paid my mom a visit to say that they decided they're not going to give the right-of-way back because they don't think we need it. Now we need the right-of-way to move forward. So shame on us for not getting that in writing, but we have been friendly neighbors for generations. We were shocked. So here we are today, and the following is a brief overview of how things unfolded. My great-great-grandfather was one of the first to settle at a camp on the Merrimack side of the lake. My grandmother grew up here vacationing as a child, and eventually she and my grandfather purchased the camp from her family. My grandmother's sister and her brother-in-law, my great-uncle Harold Rand, also purchased the camp right next door. In 1968, my grandparents, Gordon and Ruth Paul's camp, burnt down and was a total loss. My grandparents then rebuilt the camp to a single-family year-round home, which my parents, Tony and Dave Paul, were able to purchase from my grandparents. And it's the home where my sister and I grew up. During the 1980s, my parents purchased my great-uncle's cottage next door. Since the cottage was very old with an outdated septic system, we asked the town if they would allow us to remove the cottage and replace it with a gambrel-style garage with a possible future apartment above to potentially replace the living space we would lose by tearing the old cottage down. At that time, 1987, the town of Merrimack gave us a permit to build the garage back further on the property, which is technically now what's in question. During 1995, I moved back from college, and I started hanging out there. I built the apartment. It was me. Since high school, my sister and I had it partially finished as a game room, and we would always hang out there with our friends. Then I kind of transformed it into a bachelor pad when I moved back from college. My friend and I, who was a septic designer and installer, put the septic system in. Whether or not we knew we needed a permit or not, it was 95, and it was in, and it was up to today, the standards at the time. At that time, it was a bit hard to live with my parents, but even harder to leave the lake. So I started living in the apartment with another friend. We overlooked the permit for the apartment. It just happened as an eventual improvement does over the years, and the neighbors were all aware of it. In fact, last summer, my family, my wife, son, and I, my sister's family, and both of my parents were invited over to Jeb behind me and the Langer sisters to the campfire to have marshmallows with the kids and catch up. My sister's visiting from Colorado, so they wanted to say hi and catch up. We told them all about our plans to have my parents retire in the apartment, and they said it was a great idea. Now, that fact is now an entirely different situation, apparently. However, in '96, when the property was being appraised for a tax purpose, we showed the assessor the apartment, and since 1997, we've been paying taxes on this apartment as living space, now for over 21 years. I lived there for many years, with several various roommates over time, and when I moved out, my aunt moved in there and has been there since just recently. We shouldn't even be here today, quite frankly, and we wouldn't even be here if we just went ahead and remodeled the apartment and hooked up to the new septic system. Everything would remain the status quo. There has never been a problem here for over 21 years being occupied, and now when we want to have my parents retire, as we had planned as a handshake at the town in '87, there's all of a sudden opposition. The only reason we are here today is because we need to obtain a building permit in order to upgrade the electrical cable, build a deck, and access the property, our house. Now a problem stems from a change made during the 1979 where a plan was proposed and implemented that would allow several neighboring landowners between my great-uncle's cottage, which we tore down, to camps past Jeb's camp to purchase the parcels between the lake lots and the back lots and on the back land toward Babusick Lake, making these unbuildable parcels. This allowed each of the lake homeowners the opportunity to purchase the back lots to protect them. We are glad this plan was implemented, so my great uncle was able to purchase the back lot and protect it. But now the problem is, for us, is the garage is actually just over that property line of the back portion of lots that were protected from future building. My great uncle had no intention of affecting the cottage or the garage with the back lot plan. In 1987, the town building department decided to grant us a permit of the garage, which happens to be just over the property line, considered unbuildable. The town allowed us in this case. We were just replacing the old outdated cottage. In 87, there were no Shoreline Protection Act. We were the protectors of the land. Our intention, and our only intention, was to protect the land by removing the old cottage and the old septic. We didn't want to sacrifice the living space of the cottage. In retrospect, we should have just replaced the cottage, as countless other landowners around the lake have done, instead of moving the structure further back, arising this complication. We do not intend to change the landscape, to change the structure, or to change the footprint of any structure. We have a brand new septic system installed. We have tried to properly prepare so that both abutting neighbors and the town interests are best suited by gaining approval and acceptance by abutting neighbors, as previously stated. In fact, we have a majority of our abutting extending neighbors and members of Babusick Lake Association for us and for this project. We have many friendly neighbors here tonight. We are a tight community, and we are all conscientious about protecting the surrounding community. And in over 21 years, no abutting owners have ever expressed concern. In fact, we hear the opposing arguments is that if this is approved, it will set the precedent for buildable lots in the back parcels. This idea is absolutely ludicrous. We are not even putting a shovel in the ground. The last thing we want to do is build anything else. We just want to let my parents retire in peace without struggling. A couple final points. Our next-door neighbor, Grays, have given us the right-of-way, which we have engineered plans, as Joe showed, in order to reconfigure the driveway to grant an easement for the garage and house to have its own driveway, rather than using the existing right-of-way. This will give both parties more privacy, and it should be noted that the existing road was access for 5 houses and cottages. Talk about one-way traffic like that other one was talking about tonight. It will eliminate a lot of that. But currently, only access is our main house and our next-door neighbor on the Grays in the garage and apartment in question. A generation later, my mom and dad are now empty nesters and eager to retire. In fact, they are in their mid-70s and both still working to make ends meet. They need the help of my wife and I. The property tax bill alone is almost $19,000, of which a portion is already from the finished apartment. The house is too much for them to maintain alone, and the cost of living would force us into an alternate situation. But a generation later, we intended on staying on the family property. As my great-grandparents sold it to my grandparents, and my grandparents sold it to my parents, well, now they would like to sell it to my wife and I, so we can raise our family there. And hopefully, maybe someday, eventually, my son can raise his family there. This is how my grandfather had hoped it would be. My grandfather recently passed away at 99 years old, would be ashamed of the neighborhood antics at such a special and cherished area. Unfortunately for us, the 1980s shake of a hand at the building department obviously became very different from the laws and restrictions today. But it should be stated, everyone here should understand that our intention and only intention was to move the living space from the old cottage to eventually the garage upstairs. At that time, the building department said, I don't see why not if you just get a state-approved septic. And so off we were. We tore the old cottage down to protect the lake at the time, but we wholeheartedly did it with the intention we were doing the right thing. This is a decision to retire, but not have to move to a retirement home, to keep our family together, and financially it's the only way we can make it work. Again, we are not putting a shovel in the ground, we are not changing the structures, we are not building anything. Everything we need already exists and has existed. We just need access to the property, permission to install a safe electrical service, and hook up to the brand new state-approved septic system and add the deck. In closing, I will leave everyone with one thing to remember. After my sister, who resides in Colorado, learned of how two of her favorite neighbors she thought were lifelong best friends, the Langer sisters, my sister heard they would oppose her parents in this project that we had talked about in depth around the campfire. After she stopped crying, my mom finally called Lynn Langer, and Lynn said to my mom, "Why do you need the building permit? Why don't you just move in?" So this is what happens when you try to do the right thing. I plead for your understanding. Please let me help my parents later in life to stay close in the family property. Thank you.
If I could add one more thing, two things actually. There are other issues going on with this parcel. There are some private covenants that are contained in a plan and a series of deeds, and there are about 10 properties that can enforce those. One of the covenants says that our lot cannot be used for residential purposes like other 10 lots cannot. We think that we can because we've done it for more than 20 years, and therefore a suit on those grounds is barred. We've been sued in the Superior Court, and that matter is just starting, so we ask that the private covenants not be enforced by the town because the town doesn't have jurisdiction over them, and then we will work that out in the Superior Court. And also, there's some comment that about the sequence of boards. You know, where do we start with this? One interpretation of the statute says you have to go to the town council first, planning board second, and here third. We don't think the statute means to have a given series of board appearances, one way or the other. You have to touch all three bases. We think it's most appropriate to start here because we want to be able to go to the other boards and say, look, we have a conditional building permit here, and we'd like you to review it to conform with the statute. And we thank the board very much for the privilege of appearing.
So I guess what I'm trying to understand here is you'd only be here because you want it to have its own electrical and own utilities. If they shared utilities with the house, then this wouldn't be a non-issue?
That's why we needed the permit. That's why we originally went to get the permit, to do a separate electrical to update it and add a small, or just extend a small deck. And of course, hook up to the new septic system, which is obviously.
Okay, I guess my only question here is, I'm trying to understand this, so if it's just going to be family living there, why do you need separate utilities?
We don't really. It was just a way for my mom to make things more even and.
Okay, no, I only asked because
we
it
don't
sounds
actually,
like
we don't. If that was something that you won't grant us, we could do a sub panel just as easy.
Well, yeah, because that's what I was thinking is that you still could technically do it.
Right. In retrospect, we should have.
I'm just curious. I thought I'd ask.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
So if you're all, anything else you'd like to add before I open to the public?
No, sir, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question.
Yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
In doing this, will you be creating a new address? Will you become
No.
like 314?
No, there's the address exists already.
So if you're sharing the house, the utilities and everything, you've still got two addresses?
The utilities would actually go. The idea was to go 312B.
Okay,
For
that's
the
what I'm
utilities,
saying. So you're going to
right.
create a 312A and a B.
Yes, but if we don't have, if that's
Right.
something that's going to be an issue, we can do the sub panel thing.
So because you're trying to do an A and a B, you need to now define
Get a
B on its
permit.
own.
In order to do the renovations they want to do, they need to get a building permit. In order to get the building permit, they would need to have, I think they've deemed that you need to have a separate, if I remember correctly, electrical and obviously be hooked up to septic and all of that, correct? Right? Right.
I don't know what the requirements would be for the building permit. I only know what the ZBA process and the fact that they're going to.
We're not talk, yeah, okay. I
Well, the reason I'm asking is if the existing building A already exists and is approved, why would B not also be? I'm trying to define the difference between the A and the B building on the same road. If A is approved, does that now create I know what I'm thinking, I'm trying to express it.
You're losing us there.
Well, the buildings are already
Right.
existing. There is
Right.
nothing to be built.
Are you saying
All
that
right.
if A is approved, B should be approved also?
Well, that's what I'm asking, right.
No, no.
Because, that's what I'm asking, if it's a different address, is that why we're needing to approve?
No.
No, it's the buildings themselves.
Okay, all right, let me think on it.
It's okay.
I'm probably off on the wrong road.
Don't worry about it.
Thank you.
Comments? Any other comments?
No, sir. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. So I'm going to open up a public hearing. First thing I'd like to do is I'd like to read a letter into record that is for the petition. It is from Carrie and Sheila Demers at 19 Jeb Road, Merrimack, New Hampshire, 03054, dated February 14th, 2018, addressed to the Community Development Department. Dear Chairman, Vice Chairman, and Board members, as a neighbor to the Pauls living on Babusick Lake, we are in agreement with their appeal to provide an apartment in their barn for their retirement. We have been friends with the Pauls for over 30 years. We have been involved in maintaining their property and the lake's well-being. They both have been involved in maintaining their property and the lake's well-being. Dave has assisted the Babusick Lake Association with many drainage projects around the lake to ensure maintaining a healthy lake. Tony has served on the Babusick Lake Board of Directors for many years to assist the organization and its members in its endeavors to maintain a safe and thriving lake. We ask you to approve their appeal, We ask you to approve their appeal to continue to live on the lake that they love near their family members and close friends. Thank you for your consideration of this matter. Truly yours, signed Sheila Demers and Carrie Demers. That is a letter 4. And then before, I'm going to go and just read one more letter in, and then I will open it up to the crowd. This is a letter speaking out against the petition. This is says Mr. Price. We are submitting this email to be presented to the Zoning Board of Adjustment on February 28th, 2018, in regards to the Paul case number 2018-04, previously case number 2017-34. Daniel Johnson and Linda Sobel are the owners of 314 Babusick Lake Road, tax map 6A-2, lot 149, abutters to the subject property. We have some concerns about the potential impact on the property. In the past couple of years, we've experienced some drought conditions. We have monitored the status of our well water depth and had a significant drawdown, giving us some concern. Adding another dwelling unit that would tax the same aquifer would exacerbate our situation. The driveway/access road from Babusick Lake Road runs parallel to our property line and is a gravel road that is in close proximity to our house. The road serves access to 3 houses currently. With this proposed dwelling, it increases the traffic, noise, and dust. We have not been approached regarding our concerns and appreciate the opportunity to share them in this forum. Respectfully submitted, Linda Sobel and Daniel Johnson.
So, can I comment on that?
If you want to comment on the letter, by all means.
So in the letter, they're specifying the impact of what is assumed to be a new construction, whereas in this case, regardless of what happens tonight, the same water is going to get used, the same utilities are going to get used. The things that are mentioned in that letter won't change regardless of the outcome of this. And I just think that's important to take notice of.
Appreciate that. Is there anybody out there in the audience that would like to speak in favor of this petition? Please come on down and sign in, and then state your name and address, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Joe Schleifer. I am Tony Paul's brother. I'm new on the lake. I'm only there 40-some years. Question is, people are discussing the fact that they're going to lose the value of their home. My home's been going up every year. The apartment's been there for 21 years, and I've never had a problem. I have people knocking on my door trying to buy my place. I live 3 camps down between Jeb and Langers. I've been on the lake 41 years, and I've never had a problem as far as value of the home is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak in favor? Come on down. Sign in, right?
My name is Ron Engelhart. I live at 32 Shore Drive. I'm short. I'd just like to say that I've been friends with the Pauls for over 50 years. I spent all my summers growing up on the lake. As a youth, I mean, Shore Drive and Carter Road were dirt roads. And at that time, the only year-round place on the Merrimack side of the lake belonged to John and Elaine Lyons. If you look at over the years, the progress that has been made, a lot of the places have been torn down, new places have been built. It's really a nice place to live. The Pauls, they have a beautiful home. Everything they do is top-notch. I know Dave's built some of the houses in the neighborhood. He's built some of the houses on the lake, and it's high quality, first class, and certainly not going to hurt anybody's values. I'm in favor of it, and I hope it passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak in favor?
I'm going to move a wire. Something right near people's feet.
All right, thank you. You just sign in and then state your name and address, please.
Good evening.
Hi.
My name is Jane Wenzel. I'm a resident on Babusick Lake. I currently serve on the Babusick.
Could you just state your address for the record, please?
37 Scenic Vista Way.
Thank you.
I'm on the Merrimack side. And I'm currently on the Board of Directors for the Babusick Lake Association. I have served with Tony before. She was on the board prior to my arrival and was very helpful in showing me the ropes and learning more about the lake. My husband and I are very dear friends of the family. I would like to say that I concur with the Demers letter saying that both Dave and Tony support the BLA, all the lake projects. A lot of the runoff projects we've done have been helped by their family. I don't think the opposing letter from the abutter about the road increase of traffic noise and dust pertains to this situation. As Rich had said, this is an existing dwelling. I think that there's been some confusion and that the town should try to be proponents of helping the Pauls to maintain their family dwelling, and I believe they deserve quiet enjoyment. I think they have been very community involved and deserve to be able to enjoy their retirement. I think that however it can be worked so that the proper protocols are taken to allow them to stay there would certainly be in everybody's best interest.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak in favor of this petition? Come on.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Laura Dodge. I'm an attorney with McLean Middleton. I'm here tonight with Mr. Kenneth Gray. Ken Gray owns the lot that abuts, and we are the party that negotiated an easement access agreement. I'm not here tonight to speak necessarily in favor or against the application. I'd like to clarify for the board, because of the easements that we have in place and we are holding an escrow, a couple of representations that were made. First of all, the Gooder Lane that's referenced on the map, and I believe, do you guys have a copy of this plan?
Mm-hmm.
You can see it referenced there, which comes in off of Babusick Lake Road onto lot 6A2148. Gooder Lane is a driveway. It's not a private road. However, under 674, the statute that provides access to the lot that they're proposing, a right-of-way can be sufficient access to get that. I also want to clarify that Gooder Lane, being the Gray's driveway, the Pauls currently use that, and they have a deeded right-of-way over a cart path where they use to access their, for lack of a better word, I'll call it the parent tract, which is the 6A2159, which is where the home is. The right-of-way that they use to access that does not extend beyond and to the second lot where the barn and the dwelling is. That was the purpose of having an easement in place, that we would agree for them to redirect and come around and essentially go north and travel to that lot 6A to 156-9. Initially, there were some representations made earlier that that Gooder Lane was a road that serviced 5 houses. It wasn't. I suspect that historically what was happening was people were using it and treating it as if they had a right-of-way, but there was no legal deeded right-of-way for those others to use. So it really serves presently 2 houses, the Gray's existing house on 148 and the Paul's existing house, the main house on 6A2159. We are not in a position, Mr. Gray is not in a position to reclassify his driveway as a private road. But we are willing to, and we have negotiated in good faith and drafted easement agreements that would provide the new access for them to access their lot, which has the barn with the dwelling on the second floor.
So he'll give them access, but he doesn't want to make it a quote-unquote official road.
Right.
Okay. I don't think that they're really looking for it to become an official road. I think they're just looking for the access, if I understand what they were looking for.
Yeah, and that's all I just wanted to
And the town of
clarify.
Merrimack's not looking to make it a road either.
Right.
So.
And that we wouldn't, we wouldn't be obligated to record anything or whatnot, or somehow or another change that road, because the concern would be, once you open up that, then others are going to want to try to.
Of course.
Yeah, we don't want it to be a road, but we are very willing to give access to it. There
All right.
was representation, I think Dave said, that they would follow up with the other things. If the other things involve widening it or changing it, it's a driveway.
Sure. No, and I don't think that I don't think there's anybody's debating
Yeah.
that, road, driveway. I understand that there's difference. Yeah, I get that. I don't think the town is looking to pick up another road to maintain. So,
Okay.
so
We-
I think we're good at that.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that on the
I
record.
mean,
So-
obviously, if this goes forward, the next steps are to planning board and to make sure that everything is deeded and correctly and recorded correctly. And I don't think the planning board either is going to be looking for that to become a road. I can't speak for them, but I don't think they're going to. So, as far as it staying a right of way, or not a right of way, a driveway with accesses.
Right.
Yeah.
And you have copies of the easement agreements, correct?
Yes.
Okay, because in that we provided for specific dimensions of that, how it would be maintained, and whose responsibility going forward, so.
Sure. Yep. Okay.
Anything else?
My only question is, and I have looked at it, but I guess maybe you could answer in clarification. 10, 15, 20 years from now, Paul's move, someone else buys that property. Is that still, you're giving access to whoever owns that property, or just the Pauls?
It would be a permanent easement that
Permanent
would run
easement,
with the
okay.
land, so.
Just want to double check that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
No?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak in favor of this petition? Okay. Is there anybody that would like to speak against this petition? Come on down. If you could just sign in and state your name and address.
Hi.
Hi.
So, my name's Jeb Curlup,
Uh-huh.
and
Where's your address? Where do you live?
23 Jeb Road.
Okay.
And I really wanted to clarify and try to make this as factual as possible, because I'm speaking on behalf of Willard Jeb, who was my grandfather, longtime resident of Merrimack, lived on Loop Road, had his business here down by the on Depot Street for many years, and I basically, as a kid, grew up in this town. I've seen it grown over the years, and in a lot of ways. But my grandfather, before he died, he owned a lot of land out in Babusick, and he had an issue at the time. There was a lot of development going on at the south end of the lake, and he felt that the lake was being impaired, and it was. In the 80s, the lake became very impaired, where they're having blue algae green blooms, and there was a lot of, as a result of a lot of just overbuilding, and it had been, traditionally the lake had been for camps. People would be there 2 or 3 months of the year. In the summertime, bring their families. They had hand pump wells, and very simple. So basically, back then, there was nothing, there weren't conservationists per se. But Willard had, and his name was Willard Jeb, and all of this that's going on was on Jeb Road. And my name's Jeb. And Willard's plan, which was approved by the town of Merrimack Planning Board in 1978, was to take a piece of property that was for the benefit. It was actually called, it was for, he called the plan, it was the subdivision of land in Merrimack, New Hampshire, prepared for the lakefront abutters of Willard I. Jeb. And that was done in 1978, and it was approved by the planning board. And one of the people who benefited was Joe Schleifer, and also, okay, I'm sorry about that. Okay, thanks. But I'm just trying to say he cut up this. There was the waterfront properties. There were 10 properties there, and then there was land in the back. And he never wanted that to be. He wanted it to remain pristine, so there wouldn't be development, so that the lake wouldn't be impaired, so he wouldn't have this overdevelopment, and the lake would be be destroyed, which it almost was in the 1980s. I mean, since then, a lot of us have been involved in a lot of projects, stormwater diversion, to prevent this type of damage to the lake. But anyways, just getting back to Willard I. Jeb's original plan was to just cut up this piece of property in the back and to give basically for nothing, practically nothing, to the lakefront abutters, which he called the plan is for the lakefront abutters of Willard Jeb, these 10 parcels of land. Now, at the time, there were several restrictions and covenants that he put in there, so that throughout time, his wishes would be that were approved by the town would be maintained. And one of those was that number one was no lot may be used for any temporary or permanent residence or dwelling, nor be further subdivided. He also said, no owner or owners shall request the town of Merrimack to construct, repair, or replace the roadway shown on said plan which abuts said property. Also said, these covenants shall be binding on all owners and heirs, successors, and assigns, and may not be waived by variance, exception, or otherwise, and these covenants shall be incorporated in every conveyance hereafter. Now, at the time when he split up the 5.8 acres into the 10 parcels, and what he did is people had houses on the lake, and he just took this piece in the back and drew lines from the edge of their property. It was a very simple plan, and went back from the edges of those 10 abutters, 10 neighbors, and just went back from their property up until the end of his property line in the back. And that created this huge buffer zone in the back. And that was his plan, was just to preserve that buffer zone. But the deal with everyone, and that was in the plan, was that you wouldn't put any dwellings on there, you wouldn't go to the town and ask for any variances, that you wouldn't ask for any new roadways. And everybody who owns those properties has that in their deed. All the people who have spoken here tonight who own property in there, ironically, the largest property in that plan that Willard did in '78 is now owned by the Pauls. It's about 1.4 acres. At the time, it was a piece of property that was owned by a couple called the Rands. And they sold it to the Pauls on or about 1987. And all of these restrictions and covenants passed into the Pauls' deeds. The Pauls signed off on the deed. We have given all of that to you. Since then, there was a garage was built, and then I've heard other things, which campfires that I had learned tonight I participated in, which I wasn't at, and other things that, as far as if there was approvals given, which you've asked. I mean, there've been questions here tonight by members of the zoning board about, well, did you get the approvals? And then I heard, well, not to my recollection. And then I heard that, well, so we went and we just built it and did it, and we didn't get the approvals. And I mean, Mr. Paul, who is asking for these exceptions to the zoning board, he's a builder. If his son's doing this right in his backyard in what was originally intended to be a garage, and he's telling you, well, we just did it, and we're, not even imply we're just dumb kids, I think that's really trying to take advantage of the goodwill of this zoning board. And I guess my point is that everyone knows what about the subdivision that was created by Willard Jebb in 1978. And I really take issue that in this whole conversation, particularly by Mr. Mitchell, he was talking about 1916 and what they're trying to do now with this plan over here. And I think he knows very well that it's even in this, which was for the Paul's benefit, that was done back in August 19th, 1987. This was when they did their barn. Now, they said the lot lines, they also mixed us all up about there was a camp that their family owned, and then they tore it down, and it was, part of it was on this new subdivision, and then part of it was on their old. Well, it wasn't. It was all on Willard Jebb's subdivision that he did in 1978. And this is actually what they had submitted to the planning board, planning and building department, received it on September 10th of 1987. They took it right out of Willard's plan. It's right here. And the whole property is on the subdivided lot that's part of the subdivision in Merrimack prepared for the lakefront abutters of Willard Jebb. It's all in that subdivided lot that my grandfather created for his neighbors back in 1978. So I've seen a lot of attempts at trying to mix up information, mix up property lines, mix up a lot of facts, and try to avoid the fact of this subdivision that was created in 1978 and created by Willard Jebb.
My question is, I understand your was your great-grandfather or grandfather? Grandfather, right?
Grandfather.
He put these covenants in place, and people signed off on them. Are these, I guess, and I'm going to ask Rob if you know, are these enforceable? Or are these just the wishes of an individual who would prefer not to see that done?
See, that is our question as staff of the town, that if the board goes through and does all this granting and they get as far as they need to get the building permit issued, one of the conditions that we would request that you guys place on this, should you vote to approve it, would be to have the subdivision plan that Mr. Carelip's referencing and the conditions that are placed on it that are clearly listed on that plan be reviewed by the town's legal counsel to see where the enforcement or enforceability lies, if we have any say over them, if the association has say over them, how they still are in effect today, or what.
So then my other thing is that if someone owns a piece of property and they buy a piece of property, whether it be on Babusick Lake or be anywhere else, you're now telling people what they can and can't do with their property. As long as they're, now that being said, as long as they are within, if they meet the legal guidelines for building permits, setbacks, variances, if they need them or whatever, if they get all of that, you're trying to tell people what they can and can't do with the property. I'm not looking to open a debate on it. Really, I'm not. I'm just kind of, I understand where your grandfather is coming from, but it kind of, yeah.
Can I answer that?
Yeah, sure, by all means.
I mean, it's kind of like the old, I think, the buyer beware phrase, that when you buy a property, you do the title search and the deed search. If you go on a deed, you're going to see that there are all these, these restrictions and covenants from, Willard's subdivision in 1978. There's no secret. The Pauls know about it because they've used it in their barn project. It's right here that they had George Keller present to the town in '87. So I mean, it's all in people's deeds. It's there. It's available when people buy the property, and people are aware of it. So I'm not saying he's not trying to, or we're trying to tell people what they can and can't do. Not at all. It's not that. It's like, if you want to buy this property,
you have to abide by these rules.
That's right. This is what
So then you are. But okay, so, and again, I didn't want to get into debate on this, but if you just said, if you buy this property, if you buy by these rules, then you are telling somebody what they can and can't do. We saw earlier this evening, somebody bought a property on Wilson Hill Road and wanted to get a variance to be able to subdivide it. Right. So again, and that's the they have that right to come forward for the variance, whether it gets approved or not. They have that right to do that. Again, I don't want to get into a full debate on this, but I understand where you're coming from on that. And I'm sure that they're well aware of what your grandfather did. But I understand his wishes of just kind of, I guess, to be able to start telling people what they can and can't do on their property. Like Rob said, I mean, there's some legal, I guess, things that need to be taken a look at if that goes through.
No,
so
I
understand that.
I see. But on the other side, I mean, when people, they're asking for permission now to basically create a residence in a property that they have already made into a residence.
Yep.
And so we're asking the town not to.
But they're also okay. No, I understand. No, I understand what you're saying. I don't want to.
My only comment there is that when I purchased my home in Merrimack, I did have covenants I had to abide by. So it definitely is a thing. However, I'm not an attorney, but I'm pretty sure you can't sign away a right. So that's something that obviously our legal counsel has to go through. So there are things you can't sign away. I'm just not sure what they are. So in some ways, kind of both of you are correct at the same time on that.
All right. And I would agree with you that if you're moving into an area and there's an association, there are certain requirements and stuff. But this is, it sounds a little different. But anyway, again, I don't want to get into debate on that. Was there anything else that you wanted to add?
Just that I would ask that the ZBA not grant their building permit.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak against this petition?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Morgan Hollis. I'm an attorney in Nashua, New Hampshire, with the office of Gottesman and Hollis, and I'm here this evening representing Ellen Kurlop, who is the owner of 4 Jeb Road and also the daughter of, I'm sorry? 20, I'm sorry, okay. 23 Jeb Road, but also the daughter of Willard Jeb, who you've now heard from his grandson, and the son of Ellen Kurlop. Before I start into, and I'm here speaking in opposition, before I start into reasons why we're opposed and reciting some law, first of all, I just want to make sure that the letter which we submitted on behalf of our client has been received by the Zoning Board of Adjustment. No need to read it.
It was
into
read in last time.
It's a fairly lengthy letter. I put a new letter and I attached the old letter so that I'm not sure whether the prior minutes will be incorporated or reviewed by this board, but all of those points that were raised are now brought forward. The first thing that I'd like to do is sort of correct some of the issues that have been raised, both factually and legally. First of all, Mr. Konescu, pardon me if I mispronounce your name. Is it Konescu?
Konescu, but that's okay.
Konescu. You made a statement that regardless of the outcome here tonight, there'll be the same usage and impact. And I think it's important that the board realize that that is not true.
How so?
If the board does not grant a building permit, the usage of that property as a residence has no legal right. There's no legal viability. It does not exist. It does not exist by town records other than taxes.
So who can enforce that?
The town can enforce it. If there is no permit, there is no certificate of occupancy. That's what started this process. The testimony here today has been, well, we got a permit to build a garage, but, well, we didn't really get a permit for occupancy as a residence or to construct the improvements we did or to put the electrical in that we did or to put the septic in that we did. No one can do that in this town without getting the proper permits. So all of that usage and occupancy is illegal. There's nothing short of that. It is an illegal use and occupancy. And if this board does not grant a building permit, they are not allowed to use and occupy that property as a residence because it doesn't exist. Now, what people may do in their garages without permits happens all the time. What people may do in their houses when you convert a structure that's a 3-bedroom to a 4-bedroom. If you don't get a permit, the city doesn't know. But you don't have a right to do that until you get a permit. And if you simply said, well, they've lived there since 1995, therefore, well, we're going to consider it a legal residence, there's going to be a lot of problem in this town if that's the process that the town takes. You either get a permit or you don't. You don't get a building permit for a barn and have a handshake, whatever that means. I have no idea. But have a handshake that maybe sometime later it can be changed, even if that statement was made, which seems highly inappropriate and illegal. It was likely made, I see nothing wrong, come and apply. If you get a legal septic system, come forward and ask for it. I don't see any reason why you probably wouldn't get it. But that's not the same as go ahead and build it. I think the statement that was made by Mr. Paul is the truth. He started using it like many kids probably do in their parents' garage and convert a section of it. But that's not legal. So if this board does not see fit and does not see that under the criteria a building permit should be issued, that is, Mr. Price's determination is, the building inspector's determination of no building permit is overturned. If this board doesn't see fit to do that, then that occupancy cannot continue, plain and simple. It, as a matter of fact, should not be continuing right now. But that's up to the town to decide what they want to enforce or not enforce. But it's illegal. What's there today is illegal. It's illegal because they don't have a septic. They don't have an approved state septic. They never asked for one and they never obtained one, a permit. They constructed something in the middle of the night. That gets me to the second correction. There was a representation made that there was a complaint. Well, in your town records, there's a record of that complaint. And it goes on to say that this is about who made the complaint. And she wanted to stay anonymous. But at the end, it says Mrs. Gooder made the complaint, Audrey Gooder. She walked over to the house with Mrs. Paul, and it was obvious there was an apartment. She could see sheetrock in the second story of the garage with fancy lights and a fan. Had a friend staying with them and told Mrs. Gooder they were going to move him into the garage. She made a complaint to the town that it says, has large two-story heated barn, is making apartment. This fall, a lot of activity took place. Heavy equipment was over there in the middle of night. Suspect they put in new tank. The Gooders leave for the winter. When they return, the neighbors brought over flowers, etc. And it continues on. What was not stated, and is not, it was represented that the town went out there and inspected. This complaint says, right on its face, put this complaint on hold until she calls back. There was no inspection. There was no town inspector going out there to grant permission. This septic system was constructed in the middle of the night and it was illegal. The document that was submitted, the septic approval that's been obtained on the Gray's property, it's not on this property, it's on the Gray's property, and they're going to get an easement to tie into this. There's a note on that plan right in the back of this barn, and the note, which was prepared by the septic engineer, Mr. Hill, says, I'm just going to read it, area of old EDA failed. There's a failed septic system out there. They were using this illegally. They had an illegal septic system, and now they want to bootstrap it in and say we've been living there, and therefore we should have a right to continue to live there. What makes this difficult is it's couched in the terms of the Pauls, and it's an admirable objective of every family to want to stay together. I certainly would have liked to stay with my family, my parents. I'd like my children to stay on my property if at all possible, but sometimes it's not possible. So we're faced with arguing to you what the law and the reasons are, bearing in mind that there's an admirable request here. We just like to help out and keep the family together. I wish it were as simple as that. Mr. and Mrs. Paul are eventually not going to live there. Someone else is going to live there. You're going to have two houses. You're creating, they're asking for it to be on a separate and distinct lot. One of the issues that's on that plan, which was approved by the town, so it is a condition of the approval of the town planning board, states right on it, number 8, number 7, number 8, no owner or owners receiving title to these new lots, respectively, shall convey said lots separated and apart from said owner's existing lot, and the new lot and the existing lot shall be considered one lot for purposes of any further conveyance, transfer, or devise. All of a sudden, we've gone from a plan that's approved by your planning board in 1987, where this large lot of 1.369 acres was supposed to be part of the front lot. Now we have a separate lot, we have a separate building, and we have a separate residence. Without permits, without approvals of the planning board, without permits from the town or the state, and all of a sudden, they're asking the board to just make it right. And that's not right. So that's the second correction. The third correction is that there's going to be a disagreement among lawyers' interpretations from time to time, and I always feel difficult in arguing law to a lay board where there are no lawyers. However, the attorney for the applicant, Joe, made a statement, and he said, there's a disagreement among the given series of procedures, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. We think there's one procedure, he thinks there's another. But basically, the difference in the procedures are, should you go to the selectmen/town council, the governing or legislative body, first, and ask them what they think about this driveway and this house being there? Or should you come to the zoning board? And my point is, there are two cases out there that say exactly what you're supposed to do. And the cases are quite clear. I'm not going to argue, go through the cases. The cases are clear. On that type of question, whether or not the driveway fits the criteria and is acceptable to allow access to this site and is safe, you go to this town council first. because the town council, as discussed in these cases, has the right of review of whether or not this driveway is going to be wide enough. You heard some testimony by the Grays that they're not going to be allowed to widen it. The town council has to watch out for things such as, can our fire trucks get down there? Is this going to be wide enough to get our fire trucks down there, to get to that house when someone who's in there has a problem? Is it a safe road? Who's going to maintain the road? All of those things. And I'm not saying it's not, but that's who decides that. The selectmen have to decide that. They also have to give it to the planning board to review, and the planning board may say, well, wait a minute. This lot doesn't even exist. We never created this lot except for one reason. So that's why it doesn't belong here first. Under that argument, it goes first to those people. In two cases, both those cases went to the zoning board. It was tossed to the selectmen, back from the selectmen back to the zoning board. So I disagree, and I'm going to go through that in some detail, despite the fact that it's law. I just think I can try to simplify it. The third is, the other disagreement I have is, Joe asked you to not pay attention to the private covenants, as they're not really enforceable by the town. And I disagree with that. I think that's a question you may all want to ask before you make a decision on this. You may want to ask your town council. This is a planning board, a plan approved by the planning board. It's a condition of approval. The town has every right to enforce. Whether they want to enforce is another story. But they have every right to enforce conditions of any plan that is approved. Not private covenants, but planning board conditions of approval that are on the plan. So we think covenants do play a role. And finally, a point on the taxes, I guess, bothers me a little bit in that, as I say, the taxes are one thing. Town tax assessors try to assess based on what they observe. What do they see is out there? That creates a use and a value, and we're going to tax on it. They're not in the business of deciding what's legal or illegal. If you take an apartment building and convert it from 3 units to 4 units, and an assessor sees it, he's going to tax you on it. That's not going to give you the right answer as to whether it's legal or not, but he's going to tax it. So just because it's taxed, I want you to bear in mind that doesn't make it legal. And just the same, if you're not taxed on something, it doesn't make it legal. And I guess the final issue as a matter of law is, it was represented by Joe that this statute 674 was enacted in 2005, and I have the statute in front of me, and its source, it says at the bottom of the statute, source, 1983. And there are cases involving this that occurred in those days. So, that having been said, with correcting some of what I think might be either misstatements or misunderstandings, this is a complex legal issue. It's a very difficult issue for the zoning board, but there are precedents. There are 2 cases that tell you exactly what to do with it. There's also the municipal, the agency which is in charge of assisting municipalities, called the New Hampshire Municipal Association, puts out publications, and they tell you what to do with this, how to do with this. And then finally, there's a book written by Attorney Bernie Waugh, who is really the dean and the most knowledgeable municipal attorney, and he tells you how to handle these matters. There are essentially 2 routes you can go under RSA 674-41. The first route is the question of whether or not a private way qualifies under the statute to be an exception to the requirement that a road is required. That is decided by the selectmen or town council. That's clearly set forth in the case law. It's clearly set forth in the New Hampshire Municipal Association brochure that says what they do. And I'm just going to read briefly from it. It says, the Supreme Court has observed that the evident purpose of the frontage requirement is to ensure that a dwelling may be reached by the fire department, police department, and other agencies charged with the responsibility of protecting the public peace, safety, and welfare. And that's a quote from a case, a New Hampshire case, Sanderson v. Candia. Typically, the selectmen consider the width, drainage, grade, and other conditions of the road, adequacy of connecting highways, the demands on services such as police, fire, and utilities, and the effect on the vicinity and the master plan. The planning board must have an opportunity to review and comment before the decision to authorize such building is made. But the planning board's role is advisory only. If the selectmen decide to grant a building permit, the landowner must first record in the registry of deeds a notice of the municipality's lack of responsibility for maintenance of the road and lack of liability for damages resulting from the use of the road. The selectmen can impose additional conditions on a building permit, such as requiring certain improvements to the private road to secure adequate access, and such conditions are enforceable as with other land use decisions. That's the municipal association telling you how you have to apply and what you have to do. That element goes to the selectmen. Joe has asked you to ignore that, and you weigh that decision, and then he agrees he'll stipulate to those conditions. That isn't how it works. And the reason it doesn't work that way is maybe the selectmen, town council in your case, will say, this is not acceptable to us. Our fire safety people don't find it acceptable. It doesn't even come before you then. Maybe the planning board will weigh in, and it doesn't come to you. So it shouldn't be before you. It's premature, hasn't met the requirements of having the town council act on this. So that is one way they can go, and frankly, they don't need to come back to the zoning board if the town council grants those criteria. So that isn't before you. The other one, which is before you, and which I think you have a right to decide, and I'm hoping I'm simplifying it so you can just not make a decision on whether or not we have to think about, is this driveway adequate? What's before you and is the criteria of whether, under the statute, 674 Roman 1, this is in fact, you find that there's a financial difficulty or unnecessary hardship. And you also have to find the second part of the statute, which no one's quoted you. I have the statute here. It was left out of Joe's memo, doesn't say it. It does say, at the end of Joe's memo, he makes reference to it. When circumstances of the case do not require building structure or a part thereof to be related to existing or proposed streets. So you have to find not only is there unnecessary hardship or financial difficulty, but you have to determine that in conjunction with that unnecessary hardship, circumstances do not require building structures or parts thereof to be related to existing or proposed streets. Well, what does that mean? As I stated in my letter, Attorney Waugh has covered this in his book, and he states, this particular remedy is typically reserved for non-residential structures such as barns and garages. There's a reason why. Because by its very nature, a residential property must be accessible by fire and rescue and can't be having a private way as its access, which might not be properly designed and maintained. Gets back to my argument. This is an issue for the town council. Is this what they feel is appropriate to allow its emergency people to get in there? It's not a decision for you. It's a decision for the town council. The circumstances here of this building, putting a residence, do indeed require the building to be related to a public way. Why else is there a requirement for frontage? It's pretty simple. The purpose of the frontage is to ensure that it can be reached by the fire department. Until the fire department weighs in on this, how can you weigh in on it? How can you simply sweep away the issue of, well, maybe this is and maybe it isn't necessary? It is necessary. The fire department must weigh in. For you to make the finding otherwise essentially says there's no need for a frontage requirement under the ordinance. It's also taking the decision out of the hands of the planning board, which actually approved these lots to begin with, and out of the town council's hands, who must indeed worry about these safety issues and liability issues. As I said, there are actually two cases on point on this. In the Merriam Farms, Inc. versus Surrey case in 2011, they discussed what is the criteria that this board has to decide, and it talks about hardship. And it says the hardship requirement is exactly the same standard as the requirements for a zoning variance. So there had been a comment at the last hearing that the hardship requirement for this application is not the same as a variance. You're wrong. Case law is clear. It is. You must meet all the criteria of the variance. There's been no discussion of that. There's been no presentation here tonight why they have a unique piece of land, why there's no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose of the ordinance and the enforcement, and their proposed use isn't reasonable. They don't meet those requirements. The second case is Vashon. And the Vashon case, and both these cases were about long private ways or discontinued roads that go up to a house, and whether or not the town should be approving them. And they go through the process and the procedure, and they talk about it. And at the end, the town said, they're not really safe. We don't want it. And there was an appeal, and the court said, you know, that's up to the town to decide. And if the selectmen or the town council say it's not safe, it's not safe, and that's the end of it. So there are cases that talk about it. As I say, they talk about the standards, they talk about the process, and they talk about the procedure. In the Merriam Farm case, the court said, there was a specific finding that a house without access to a town-maintained road is cut off from emergency vehicles and town services. If you overrule Mr. Price's department's decision not to issue a building permit, and you order that a building permit be issued, you will in fact be granting an occupant a right to build a residential use off of a very long private way for which the town has no ability to control, regulate, make sure it's open in the winter, make sure they can get down it, make sure it's wide enough for a fire truck. All of those things are important. The applicant on page 3 of the application provides arguments of the benefit of constructing a new driveway. But that frankly has nothing to do with the financial difficulties
I have a question.
or unnecessary hardship.
Not to interrupt you, I have a question. So, you had made mention a couple times of the town needing to be able to come down the road for emergency services, which I fully agree. And that it would be obviously it's been said that this is going to be an easement's going to be granted, but it's not going to be considered a right of way or a road based upon what they had such. So my question is, and maybe you can help me clarify this, how does that differ from a PUD or a condo association whose roads are also not under the function of the town and they're responsible for clearing the road? One would assume, to go for what assumptions are worth, that they'll plow the driveway and make sure that people could pass down the driveway in the wintertime. But I'm just based on the argument you're stating. I mean, wouldn't the same apply for like a condo association where the roads are part of the condo association and they're responsible for maintaining those roads?
There are two significant differences.
Okay,
the first of
please.
which is the condominium or a PUD is permitted under the planning board regulations, and they have to meet certain requirements. One of which is that the road must be built to the town road standards. You can't just have a driveway servicing all of these condominiums.
Sure.
So that's a very important distinction. And otherwise, the planning board wouldn't allow those units there. If they just put a one-lane driveway in there, I can guarantee you the fire department would say that's not acceptable.
Right.
So that's a huge difference. It goes to the planning board, and the planning board makes that decision. Whether it's a private road or a public road, that road must meet the safety standards of the town and be constructed in that fashion.
Okay.
The second distinction is in approving condominiums, almost every town requires that the documents be approved by the town council, and the town council determines, are there mechanisms in place to ensure that this access way will be kept open?
So that applies for that. So now, if you're talking about long driveways, which we heard earlier this evening, those are not necessarily, I mean, some of those long driveways, you get a fire truck up, I don't know if you can get it back down again without driving on the lawn. I mean.
And that, again, is a planning board decision when they're allowed to have joint driveways. Now, there are old existing joint driveways, but going forward, right now, what the statute requires is that's what the town council, after consulting with the planning board, makes the decision. Is this acceptable? And they may well make that. It might be an easier path for these folks to go to the town council and plead their case, submit their documents, and say, this is what we're proposing. Here's how wide our access way is. Here's what we're going to do.
Okay.
And maybe the council will say, well, it's got to be 18 feet wide, and maybe the Grays will allow it to be 18 feet wide. But all of that shouldn't be in front of you.
I understand.
And that's why you can't have the cart before the horse. You can't have you agreeing, well, that's a reasonable request. We'll grant the building permit condition on you going up there. That is not what these cases stand for. It must go to them first. It's clear it must go to them first on that particular choice of the statute. On the other choice of the statute, you have a right to decide, does it meet the criteria of the 3 points? And the 3 points of the statute, does it meet the criteria? Under 2, practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship, which the Supreme Court has said are exactly the same, and you're familiar with what hardship is.
Yep.
And the Supreme Court says you have to make those decisions. You've got to find that there is hardship. And when the circumstances of the case do not require the building, structure, or part thereof. That's what you have to decide tonight. And I don't, as I say, I don't know how you can make a determination that the circumstances of this case for residents at the end of a long private driveway don't require it to be related to the street. There's a reason you have frontage, that's the reason you have frontage. I also don't think there's any argument here in front of you about hardship. They haven't met those criteria of the hardship. They have not even made an argument in front of you that there's something unique here about this property that the other properties, like the lots that Jeb talked about, don't share. They haven't made a case that enforcing the no-build restriction or no frontage restriction on this case doesn't bear any relationship to the purpose of the ordinance. Of course it has a relationship. And most importantly, what they asked to do there, putting a residence over a garage that was permitted, making something illegal legal, is not reasonable. It's not reasonable because of the covenants. It's not reasonable because you shouldn't have one there. If they wanted to start this in the very beginning, they would have had to come forward and do what they're doing now. But it's not a reasonable use of the property, and you should make that finding. No hardship, and the circumstances don't allow you to waiver this requirement. That kicks it back to the people who should be making this decision, town council, not the zoning board. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob? I'm sorry, Attorney, I forgot your...
Morgan Hollis.
Morgan Hollis, sorry. Thank you, Attorney Hollis. Based on Attorney Hollis's comments, is this something, council, to send it to council? Not to belabor the issue, but...
Yeah, I'm not in a position to speak on it. I'm not educated enough on the matter. When this all first came about, we notified our legal counsel of the petition. They initially submitted the variance application. Our legal counsel advised us to have them do the administrative appeal, and that's what they did. So in terms of the other alternative path of going to the council first, I haven't seen it. I don't know about it. I don't know the cases. I've got no familiarity with it from a legal standpoint.
Okay.
So I want to be clear that my point is they have a right to be here.
Right.
They have a right to appeal. But your review standard is limited. And it's not for you to find whether this private access way fulfills the criteria of the statute.
You're absolutely right. There are a lot of points that were brought up this evening by yourself as well as the Pauls that really do kind of, to be honest with you, fall under the purview of more of the planning board necessarily than they do zoning. But yeah, no, unfortunately, we're here. This is where we're at. So, but thank you very much for your.
Thank you.
So, Robert, Robert?
Yep.
May I ask you, when the original administrative decision was made, was that based on not having the documentation for the easement?
The decision was made to deny the building permit because they did not meet the criteria on the law. We had no information about an easement or anything along those lines. So the building department denied the permit. They then tried to submit the variance application first to be able to put a single-family residence on the the lot that didn't have frontage. And that's when, like I said, our legal counsel said, no, this path exists in the RSA. They need to do it as an appeal of administrative decision because this is laid out for them to do it this way. So then we're just kind of advised the Pauls to submit that application and come before you based on that.
Okay. Did you want to retort?
I'd be repeating myself for things I've already said. I don't think it's necessary to make a further statement.
Okay. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak against this petition? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Oh, okay, by all means, come on down, sign in, state your name and address, please. Were you sworn in?
No, I think I was here after that.
Raise your right hand. Swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Just make sure you speak into the microphone, please.
Okay, my name is Lynn Langer. I live at 2 Langer Way.
Okay.
And I didn't expect to be here tonight. I didn't plan on speaking, but I've heard some things that I thought I'd like to address.
Please.
So I've been on the lake over 55 years, neighbors of Dave and Tony, and been friends and good neighbors, and I hope to remain that. I'm looking at this as I'm taking the personal right out of it and looking at it as my property and the property it affects. And I feel pretty strong that there's history here. Young Dave had talked about history, and I think he missed some very important points and led us in a different way. My dad was the one who worked with the Jeb's dad, or grandfather, to be fair with everybody and put the properties out back of all these properties, so that if somebody needed septic systems or just have a buffer back there, that's what it was for. I know my dad also had a handshake agreement with Dave that if Rand's property sold, we would split it in half so that we could split that land in half. That never happened. They changed their mind. When my mother asked Tony what happened, she said, "Oh, we changed our mind." So they took that, which is fine, and we don't have any problem. But when the building went on in the back, always, what they did is they took the Rand, they dropped the Rand camp in the ground and put the boat ramp in. Now that boat ramp is probably 15 or 20 feet lower than the land now. So where the Jeb Road was, the paper Jeb Road that never was and couldn't be, they wouldn't even be able to use that Jeb Road to get to where my sister put the garage to the house. Which did offer to give them back property to get past that. But anyway, I think that it's, they made the choice to drop the camp. They made the choice to put the boat ramp in, and that sort of defined that they were never going to put Jeb Road through that piece of property. It wasn't going to go there. My concern is I would love them all to stay here, but my concern is that property is going to be put residential, and now it can be sold to anybody, and it becomes back property. It's not connected to the waterfront. That property was connected to the waterfront. They chose to separate it from the back property that we all bought. They separated it and made it all one continuous for their main house. So that property has really been one property. And now they're trying to make it two, and I'm afraid that that's going to sell off someday because things change. You could grant them.
Right now.
I know. And you could grant them that today, and next year they have to move or something happens, and now that gets sold to somebody else, and that's back property. That's not what that was intended for. And that's all. I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak against this petition? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. In speaking with Fran, who's the vice chair, and Fran and I have been on the board for a while, there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of legality with this. There's the JEB's covenants that were put in place for the homeowners. There was testimony by Attorney Hollis. Oh, thank you. I don't know if I can do this or not, but I'm going to take a shot at it. I want our legal. Before the board makes any decision on this, because this is a very heated, very passionate, very personal decision. And there are areas of legality that I do not, unfortunately, have. And I want to make sure, I want to have our town legal review JEB's covenants and the legality of that, review the right-of-way, or not the right-of-way, but the what's being held in escrow as far as the road, right? The driveway, the Gooder Lane. There are things here that need to be reviewed, and I think it'd be a disservice if we were to vote, whether we vote in favor or against. I think it'd be kind of a disservice to do that without our town legal having reviewed this and giving us a legal opinion, a brief on what our next steps would be. I do apologize. I know everyone's been here and as testimony, and I do appreciate everybody coming out, and I know that some of you have been here 2-3 times, and I appreciate that, but I think it would be unfair to make a judgment without us without Merrimack's legal department taking a closer look at this. Again, like as I said, I apologize for the inconvenience for folks, but in fair judgment to all parties involved, I really think that you want to make sure that that is done, so that it's taken care of and it's reviewed, and so that everybody understands where the town is coming from as we move on this. So that's my spill on that, Rob.
Yep, the board is absolutely within their rights to do that. My recommendation would be to request or make a motion to continue the case to another date certain to allow time for that legal review to take place.
Again, I do apologize, folks, but I'm sure that the Pauls, as well as Jeb and the Langers, want to make sure that the decisions made has been reviewed properly. So I am, as the chairman, I am making a motion to continue this at a later date after our town legal have had a chance to review this. Once they've reviewed it, I'm sure that community development will be reaching out to them.
If you're going to continue, you have to have a date certain. So I would say the March 28th meeting just to start.
You want to give it an extra month, though, just
you
in
can
case?
choose April, absolutely.
I would give it April.
That would be
This
April 25th, I believe.
Okay.
All right.
It's,
I do apologize for any inconvenience of folks, but I think that the right call needs to be made on this, and I want to make sure the right call is being made, and there's legal ramifications here that I think need to be reviewed by our town legal as well, because whether it sets a precedent, and there were a lot of great, whether it sets a precedent or not, there have been a lot of very convincing arguments. So I just want to make sure. So I'm going to continue this to the April 25th, 2018 meeting, giving our legal counsel time to review and to get back to the appropriate parties with their findings on this, and then go from there.
yeah, because all families are so passionate on this, we have to give it time enough for our legal counsel to make a decision on this.
So
I would say Attorney Hollis brought up a lot of great points that just went over my head, honestly. So
As long as we can get a ruling on this.
I'm in complete agreement with that.
I think it's fair to Jeb. I think it's fair to the Pauls that we make sure that the due diligence is done. Fran, second. So all in favor of a motion to continue this to the April 25th meeting after our legal counsel has had a chance to review, say aye.
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 All opposed? So 5-0-0. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Our legal counsel will be reaching out with their findings. Thank you.
I just hope that both parties understand where we stand with this, that we have to get our own legal counsel involved in this.
All right. Next item. Discussion of possible action items regarding, community development. Anything that we want to?
Nope, just move on to the approval of minutes unless anybody else has anything else they'd like to discuss.
Okay. We're just gonna get 5 minutes for everyone to clear out. So we're gonna 5 minutes for everyone to clear out. Everybody just hang tight for a second. Okay. We'll talk about that later.
Yep, that's fine.
I understand. All right, so just, all right, we'll come back from that real quick to let the room clear out. So is there any news from community development to discuss?
Nope.
Okay, and the minutes in my wicked fast meeting last month.
Motion to
The
approve.
record.
Yeah, well, I'll get.
The only thing it says 7:20. I really think it was 7:18. I think I was a little faster than that, but I still beat Fran 7:30.
No, I was 7:18.
Actually, it was 7:18.
Or 7:18. It was like 7:18.
No, it was 7:18, I think.
7:18.
Yeah,
So
but
that
I
is-
had a 7:18.
I want the
also.
record to show.
I think we're in a tie
I want
right
the-
now.
I want the record to show. Anyway, so we have a motion to approve by Rich.
And I'll second it with at least one correction, right, Sina? In line 21, it's not December 27th, 2018.
That's correct.
That's page 2. Yep.
Page 2.
Line 21.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's double-sided, I forgot.
Actually, and the same thing in line 19 as well. It's December 27th, right? Oh, that's right.
That's correct.
All right, never mind. All right, so we have a second. Ms. Fran, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? And one abstention. So
2 abstentions, so I can do it.
4-0.
I was abstaining. too.
Okay, so approval, 302. Thank you. It's 5 after 10.
So,
Gonna make the motion to.
Is the November meeting on the week of Thanksgiving?
Really? We're not even in the summer yet.
It's
Yeah.
scheduled for
Yeah.
November
Just trying to get through
28th.
the storm this weekend. You're already out to Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving is the 22nd, so the November meeting is the week after Thanksgiving.
Okay. Fair enough. I'll be
You
here.
won't be here?
All right.
I'm going to Disney.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion, so moved.
Seconded. All in favor? Thank you very much. Everybody have a good evening.